It's not only about figures and forecast, but also understanding how the policy decisions that are taken shape the daily lives of Rwandans and beyond. Allow me to recognize and welcome the Honorable Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda, who is our host this morning, the Honorable Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda, Cabinet members present, members of Parliament from both chambers, the National Bank of Rwanda board members, CEOs and MDs from the financial sector, development partners, all protocol observed. You're welcome once again. The purpose of today's statement is to review economic and financial developments from the first half of the year and also share an outlook for the remainder of 2025. My name is Bob Allen, and I'm the Acting Manager of Corporate Communication at the National Bank of Rwanda, and I'm happy and it's my honor to be your Master of Ceremonies today. This morning's agenda will begin with the Governor's presentation, followed by a Q&A session, and after that we'll have a special presentation on eCash. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our followers and viewers online who are following this event online. And together with the people in the room, feel free to use the hashtag MPFSS 2025 to engage with us. For the members of the media in the room, we'll have a press conference right after the main session. And now, without any further ado, allow me to invite the Honorable Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda to deliver her presentation. You're welcome, Governor. A round of applause for Governor.
Thank you, Bob, our Master of Ceremonies, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Senator, Honorable Members of Parliament's lower chamber, Honorable Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda, board members of the National Bank of Rwanda, Honorable Senior Advisor in the Office of the President, senior government officials, Vice Mayor of the City of Kigali, Chairperson and CEO of the Private Sector Federation, CEOs and Managing Directors of our financial institutions, members of academia, development partners, colleagues, all protocols observed. Good morning. Muraho neza. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you all to this second Monetary Policy and Financial Stability Statement of 2025. And I also extend a warm welcome to the participants joining us online. Today's presentation is grounded in the National Bank of Rwanda's core mandate to first maintain price stability and second, to promote a sound and inclusive financial sector. These are critical foundations for a resilient economy and for a trusted financial system. One might ask, why do we still need a monetary policy and financial statement when we have real-time economic and financial data? Well, this September, MPFSS presents economic and financial sector developments for the first half of 2025. And it's not only done as statutory requirement, but as an essential tool for transparent and responsive policy making. Indeed, the central bank issues monetary policy and financial stability statements twice a year to communicate developments in the global and domestic economy, as well as the rationale for monetary policy decisions. It also highlights the performance of the financial sector, looks at stability indicators, as well as risks within the financial system, coupled with the central bank's measures to address them. The MPFSS, therefore, supports macroeconomic stability, guiding market expectations, and reinforcing confidence in the economy and financial sector. Having set the scene, in particular for our guests who are attending the MPFSS for the first time, let me start by presenting the key developments of the global economy and Rwanda's economy in the first 6 months of this year. First, global GDP trends. Global GDP growth is projected to slow down to 3%, in 2025 from a GDP growth of 3.3% that we had last year. And according to the IMF's World Economic Outlook, global GDP should slightly recover in 2026 with a growth of 3.1%. And when we break this down by region, we see that advanced economies are expected to grow more moderately to 1.5% from 1.8% in 2024, before a slight recovery in 2026. As for sub-Saharan Africa, the GDP growth is projected to stabilize at 4% in 2025, with expectations of improved performance to 4.3% GDP growth in 2026, reflecting the region's economic resilience post-COVID and all the external shocks that we have observed in the last 5 years. In the context of a slowing global economy and shifting global trade policies, global inflation is projected to continue easing at 4.2% in 2025, compared to the 5.6% global inflation that we had in 2024. Inflation is expected to further ease to 3.6% in 2026, reflecting lower energy and food prices and improved supply chain conditions. However, in sub-Saharan Africa, inflation is projected to remain in double digits, but taking a decelerating path from the 18.3% inflation rate we had last year to 13.3% in 2025, reflecting pressures that we still feel from currency depreciations in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as high food prices which still persist in some economies. This global easing of global inflation is on the back of commodity prices, which are on a downward trend. The energy index, which incorporates prices of crude oil and natural gas, is projected to decline by 17.4% in 2025 and further by 5.6% in 2026. And this reflects weaker demand for energy products while there's ample supply. And for instance, if we look at crude oil prices, they are expected to decrease by 20.7% in 2025 and further by 6.3% in 2026. And if we take the period from January to June, crude oil prices decreased by an average of 14.6% from $82 per barrel that we had in the same period in 2024 to around $70 a barrel by the end of June. And this is a reversal of the 5.4% increase that we had recorded for crude oil prices in 2024. The non-energy index is also projected to decline, with global food prices expected to decline by 7% this year and slightly decreasing by 0.8% in 2026, easing import cost pressures, especially for Rwanda's economy. What we have observed, however, is that prices of export commodities, such as coffee, as well as minerals, remain elevated, which supports Rwanda's exports earnings, as we will see in a moment. And the increase in metal and mineral prices is due to the high demand from mainly the electronics and tech companies globally. After the assessment of the global economy, the following section focuses on the domestic market. Rwanda's economy in the first half of 2025 remained robust, with real GDP growth at 7.2% in the first 6 months of the year, as announced yesterday by the National Institute of Statistics. And indeed, with the rebasing of the GDP numbers to 2024 constant prices, GDP grew in the first quarter by 6.5% and then by 7.8% in the second quarter of 2025. The strong GDP growth that we see was supported by first services sector, which grew by 9.4%, then the industry sector growing by 8.8%, and modest agricultural recovery for the 6 months at a growth of 1.7%. But we need to point out that in the second quarter of 2025, we've seen agriculture growth reaching 8%. The growth of the services sector is mainly driven by strong growth in trade, in services by 14%, while the industry sector growth is driven by construction, which grew by 12.5% on the back of major infrastructure projects. From the domestic economic growth data, we move on now to international trade. And Rwanda's international trade performance was very strong in the first 6 months of 2025. As we can see, exports increased by 6.2% in the first 6 months, driven by mainly coffee exports, minerals, and non-traditional exports. On the other hand, imports grew, but at a slower pace, at 4.5%, and this resulted in a trade deficit recording a modest increase of 3.6%. But we can see that in the second quarter of 2025, meaning from April to June, we actually had a narrowing trade deficit, which is a good development, on the back of the very high growth of merchandise exports in the second quarter, growing at 15.5%. And these positive developments of the external sector explain why our currency has stabilized. With the foreign exchange pressures easing, the Rwandan franc's depreciation against the US dollar at the end of June stood at 2.9%, which compares to a higher depreciation rate that we had in the same period in 2024, where the depreciation at that time was at 3.7%. And one may recall that 2023 and 2024 were years with high levels of depreciations reaching 18% and 9% respectively. And this improvement in the foreign exchange market were supported by an improvement of the trade deficit, especially in the second quarter of 2025, as we just seen in the last slide. Broader weakening of the US dollar in global markets, especially in the second quarter of 2025, and then domestic foreign exchange market reforms that were conducted in the first half of the year. The next session looks at developments in the interbank, deposit, and credit markets. In the first half of 2025, we had reduced the central bank rate from 7%, which we had as of June 2024, to 6.5%. And all the rates declined, starting with the interbank rate, which reduced from 8.21% to 6.51%. The deposit rate also decreased from 10.2% to 9.6%. And the lending rate also declined from 16.3% to 15.9%. Although last month the Monetary Policy Committee decided to slightly increase the central bank rate to 6.75%, we expect the trend observed on the interbank and credit markets to remain in the medium term. And this monetary policy decision taken last month was driven by a revision of our inflation forecasts. As we will see in the development of the inflation data, in the last 3 years, our inflation had reached record levels, especially in 2022, but started easing, as you see on the slide, starting from the first quarter of 2024 and coming back towards our target band of 2 to 8%. In the first half of 2025, headline inflation stabilized at 6.7% from the 4.6% that we had in the first half of 2024. And this slight increase of headline inflation was due to increased core and fresh food inflation, while energy inflation declined. And the increase that we observed in core inflation was primarily driven by significant increments in food inflation, as well as core hotels and restaurant prices. Fresh food inflation also rose significantly in the first half of this year, primarily driven by higher vegetable prices, largely reflecting the moderate performance of agricultural season during season A, but also increase of fruit prices as limited supply during the growing period pushed prices higher. However, energy inflation, as you see on the slide, eased following a decline in liquid fuel. Liquid fuel incorporates petroleum products, and this easing of energy inflation was mainly influenced by lower international prices in the first 6 months of the year. But on the solid fuel, which is composed of charcoal and firewood, we also saw an easing inflation supported by favorable weather conditions that ensured stable supply of both charcoal and firewood on the local market. In August 2025, headline inflation stood at 7.1%, which is still below the upper bound of our inflation target. Looking ahead, our assessment points to an inflation that will average 7.1% this year, and then easing to 5.6% in 2026. However, there are risks to this outlook, mainly linked to adverse weather conditions, which could affect agricultural production. In particular, we see that climate change continues to impact our traditional agricultural season and rainfall patterns, and this is a risk that we monitor closely, working with the Ministry of Agriculture, the National Institute of Statistics, but also Meteo Rwanda, Rwanda's meteorological agency. Other risks that we see to these projections are the global geopolitical tensions, as well as international trade policies uncertainties that may impact and influence domestic economic conditions. To navigate these trends, the central bank will continue to monitor these developments, and we stand ready to take appropriate measures to build the necessary resilience for our economy against any external shock. Next, I will move on to the financial sector stability and performance. First, we can see that our financial sector continues to expand. As of June 2025, total assets of our financial sector had increased by 23% compared to the same period in 2024, reaching 14.3 trillion Rwandan francs. And when we look at the financial assets to GDP, the ratio also rose to 66% from the 65% that we had in June 2024, indicating increased financial deepening. And this growth was driven primarily by significant increases in key assets components, including contributions from the pension sector and return earnings by our financial sector in all subsectors, being banks, microfinance, insurance, and the pension sector. In addition, credit to GDP has also increased slightly, reaching 27% in June 2025, compared to 26% that we had in 2024. When we look at the credit market developments, lending continued to increase, with also an improvement in quality of loans across banks and microfinance. Outstanding loans in both sectors increased by 15%, another double-digit increase, with the outstanding loans now reaching 5.6 trillion Rwandan francs. And when we look at the top 10 finance sectors, construction, in line with the growth in construction that we've seen in the first 6 months of the year, are in the top finance sector, followed by trade, manufacturing, and then household, which include individual loans, transport sector, accommodation and food services. This includes restaurants, real estate activities, electricity and energy sector, then education and agriculture. And here we have to emphasize on the fact that being the microfinance sector, but also the non-deposit taking lending companies, has contributed significantly to the financing of agriculture in the last 6 months. When we look at non-performing loans, they are below the maximum threshold of 5%, being for banks or microfinance. The NPL ratio for banks stood at 2.6% in the first 6 months of the year, while for microfinance institution, NPL ratio was at 3.4%. For the financial sector stability indicators, we can see that our financial sector remains strongly capitalized, with the capital adequacy ratio of banks standing at 21.6%, which is above the 15% required minimum. For microfinance institutions, it's the same trend. It also has adequate capital buffers with 34% of capital adequacy ratio, which is way above the 15% required. And the insurance sector also had a solvency ratio at 215%, above the minimum required of 100%. And this gives us confidence that our financial sector has enough capital to absorb potential shocks. On the liquidity side, we also observed that our financial sector is sufficiently liquid to meet any short-term needs. The bank's liquidity coverage ratio stood at 289%, while the liquidity coverage ratio for microfinance institutions was at 73.8%, above their minimum required liquidity coverage ratio, while for insurance is the same trend, also with a liquidity ratio at 109%. Our financial sector continues to be profitable, with the profitability sustaining not only expansions, but also the growth of assets with an increase in retained earnings. The return on equity for the banking sector stood at 18.9%. For the microfinance, the return on equity was also in double digits at 14.8%, and the insurance sector had the highest return on equity at 19.2%. Looking at our pension fund, the total assets of the pension sector also increased by 26%, with total assets at the end of June 2025 reaching 2.3 trillion Rwandan francs. When we look at our public pension contributions, there was a significant increase driven mainly by government's reforms on the statutory contributions, but also this contributed to increase in benefits that are dispersed to people in retirement. And the Ejoheza long-term savings scheme, which covers people in the informal sector, there was also a significant increase in contribution by 55%, reaching total contribution of 11 billion at the end of June. And this was driven mainly by extensive outreach programs to mobilize people to save through Ejoheza. On the payment systems, we continue to see that innovation in digital payment systems have supported and continue to support the cashless economy agenda of government, with electronic payments valued now at 302% of GDP, while electronic retail payments continue to increase, reaching 33.5 trillion from January to June 25, which is higher than the 21.4 trillion that we had as value of retail payments in the same period in 2024. In addition, the Rwanda Integrated Payments and Processing System, RIPS, was upgraded in the first half of the year, offering real-time, round-the-clock transaction capabilities and also complying with the new global payment system messaging standards, ISO 20022. And this is an important step in meeting global payments standards, but also boosting efficiency, enhancing Rwanda's financial market infrastructure to support not only domestic transactions, but also cross-border transactions. As you can see, the improved system availability led to an increase in higher volumes of transactions in June 2024, reaching 2.7 million whereas in the transaction value, we are above, for the first time, 10 trillion Rwandan francs in the first 6 months of the month. Our outlook for the financial sector, we expect the sector to remain stable and resilient, supported by the strong capital positions, ample liquidity buffers, but also continued operational efficiency. However, we see that we need to remain vigilant on emerging risks that we observe, linked to one, uncertainties surrounding the global economic performance, which could influence our own economy's performance, the loan concentration risk, as well as fraud and operational risk, mainly due to increased digitalization of our financial system. And the central bank, as financial supervisors, continue to enforce prudent risk management practices within this financial system, as well as implement timely and adequate policy measures to preserve the stability of the financial sector. As a recap for the key economic and financial sector developments in the first half of 2025, we observe that one, global economic growth is projected to remain subdued. However, Rwanda's economy continues to perform well. Third, the foreign exchange market has stabilized, with the Rwandan franc destabilization easing due to recent external trade performance, but also market reforms in the foreign exchange market. And fourth, inflation in Rwanda is projected to remain within our target band of 2 to 8%. For the financial sector, we've seen that Rwanda's financial sector demonstrated resilience and sustained growth in line with the growth of the domestic economy. Lending continued to expand across all sectors of the economy, supporting private sector activity and investments. And financial institutions overall remained sound and stable, while digital transactions are expanding, supported by innovative and efficient systems. Hence, in spite of global headwinds, the central bank remains confident about Rwanda's macroeconomic stability, sustained growth, and the soundness of our financial system to support the financial resilience of households and businesses. So this marks the end of our monetary policy and financial stability statement for the first half of 2025, and we are ready to take your questions and engage in meaningful conversations. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Another round of applause for Governor. I know many of us have been seated for a while, and I also know that all of us have been seeing people taking notes, and we are going to go into that session shortly. But now, let me just invite you. Health experts tell us that sitting for quite some time is not really healthy. So let me just ask us to raise up and just greet the people on your left, on your right, your front, and back. Get to know, a fist bump. Many of us came in, running, and just get to know someone. Yeah. And while we are at it, we all know that consumer protection at the National Bank is a priority. And the most effective way to share this message is not through speeches alone, but also through music videos. So let me invite the team to just project that video.
Umuguzi wa service ku mari yawe ukorana n'amabanki mobile money.
I'll ask us to keep standing just to stretch. Let me ask us to keep us standing.
Kumenyeshwa ibikozwe kuri konte zawe ukabona SMS email ukamenya ibibaye ibicuruzwa ushaka igihitemo kandi mu kigo wakunze se wari uzi kurengerwa n'itegeko umuguzi wa serivisi ku mari yawe aho ukorana n'amabanki umva mobile money umva inshingano zawe kumenya ubwo burenganzira itegeko riraturengera nk'abaguzi ba serivisi z'imari uko zingana abari abaguye inguzanyo umva ubwishingizi umva burya birakwiye kumenya ubwo burenganzira
gufunguza cyangwa gufunga gukangura no gukurwa muri CRB guhabwa raporo y'ibyakorewe kuri konti yawe buri nshuro imwe mu mwaka kwandukuza ingwate mu minsi 15 ibyo byose n'ubuntu guhabwa serivisi noze kandi ku gihe ibyo ni nk'ihame ntakuka ushobora kwemeza cyangwa kwanga inguzanyo maze kwemeza ibisabwa byose gusesa amasezerano nta hazabu nta bihano wakwishyura inguzanyo mbere y'igihe cyateganyijwe keretse iyo inguzanyo yawe yimuriwe mu kindi kigo cy'imari umva
se wari uzi kurengerwa n'itegeko umuguzi wa serivisi ku mari yawe aho ukorana n'amabanki umva mobile money umva inshingano zawe kumenya ubwo burenganzira itegeko riraturengera nk'abaguzi ba serivisi z'imari uko zingana abari abaguye inguzanyo umva ubwishingizi umva burya birakwiye kumenya ubwo burenganzira ubu wasubizwa ikibazo cyawe kuri serivisi z'imari songa n'ikigo cy'imari kiguha izo serivisi bidakunze yambaze beneri umugenzuzi w'ibigo by'imari koresha intumwa chatbot amakuru anyuraho bibera abajura bagendere kure bagamije kugucucura umubare wawe w'ibanga irinde kugira undi wawumenya umucuruzi nyawe aba afite uruhushya se wari uzi kurengerwa n'itegeko umuguzi wa serivisi ku mari yawe abo ukorana n'amabanki umva mobile money umva inshingano zawe kumenya ubwo burenganzira.
Thank you. All right, thank you. May we take our seats? I think many of you heard the words Gereranya and Inumwa chatbot, but these are platforms by the National Bank of Rwanda that have been created to help and facilitate financial consumers to compare prices and also to share complaints or any feedback on some of the things that they would like improved. And thank you for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next session, allow me to invite to the stage the Honorable Governor, who is together with the Deputy Governor and the Chief Economist, will also lead us in the next session, which is the Q&A session. Let me invite the Honorable Governor, the National Bank of Rwanda. Round of applause. Let's invite also the Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda and also the Chief Economist of the National Bank of Rwanda. As I mentioned before, we're going to go into a Q&A session. I saw many of us taking notes. I don't know if there are questions, concerns, but feel free to ask. We can ask in any language, no mu Kinyarwanda. Nuwo mwanya tugiye kujyamo kugira ngo tubaze ibibazo. Dufite indangururamajwi in the room to help to facilitate. And also I've been seeing there are questions that are coming in online through Slido. So feel free to send in your questions. We can project some of those that have already come in. I will take the advantage of seeing those and maybe asking some of these that have already come in as we prepare for others in the room. You can raise your hand, you introduce yourself, and maybe ask a question. Governor, since the Masters of Ceremonies, I'll take the advantage of asking maybe the first two questions that came in. The first one said, Honorable Governor, what factors have driven the export growth in the first half of 2025, and do you anticipate this trend to persist? And the second is how concerning is the rise in fraud cases affecting digital transactions, and what steps are being taken to address this issue?
Thank you for the questions. Starting with export growth, it's true that we've seen really impressive growth in exports of merchandise, especially in the second quarter of 2025, as I mentioned earlier. And the export growth was mainly driven by, one, the traditional exports, coffee and minerals, on the back of high prices internationally. But also when we look at non-traditional exports, we've seen regional export of manufactured products, being cooking oil, wheat flour especially, which is an indication of the very good performance of our manufacturing sector, but also the results of the promotion of Made in Rwanda, as well as the industrial policy taken by government. So we anticipate this trend to persist, especially when we look at international export commodities prices for now. But there still has to be more efforts to continue producing more in the non-traditional exports to continue on this trend. The second question on fraud cases. It's true that there's mentioned one of the risks that we are monitoring is fraud risks in the financial sector, which is to be expected with the fast pace of digitization and use of digital means of payments, but also digital financial services. We've put in place a few measures. The main one at the central bank was to put in place what we call the Financial Sector Security Operations Center, which consolidates all information regarding any cyber threat or potential cyber attacks in our banking microfinance sector, and we will extend it to insurance sector. And working with the National Cybersecurity Agency, that allows us to detect in real time any cyber threat that would come in our system, be able to also respond immediately in case of potential attack. But it was important to also conduct various and trainings broadly in terms of cybersecurity. Second is to look at AI-powered tools to prevent frauds, which we are now working with some of the central banks that we partner with, especially in Asia, to be able to roll out some of those fraud prevention tools. And some of our banks actually have those tools in place. And lastly is the collaborative efforts by different institutions, central bank, RURA, law enforcement authorities. You've seen an awareness campaign that's ongoing, Vima Matwi, to make sure that there's education, financial education, and digital literacy to ensure that people don't fall prey to fraud. And this campaign will continue throughout the year. But this will be a continuous effort. It cannot only be financial sector or the financial sector regulator only. It has to be all concerned stakeholders really taking this risk as a risk that we will continue to see as we promote digitization of our financial services. Stop here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Governor. I'll open it up to the room. If you have a question, we have some microphones in the room. Introduce yourself and who you're addressing the question to. All right, we have a question in the back. Can please stand and introduce yourself.
Good morning, all. I'm Eson Mintore Gabijut from ULK. I'm a student of economics year 3. I have a question.
Can you speak up? We can't hear you.
Sorry. I say that I'm Eson Mintore Gabijut, student of year 3 economics from ULK, Kigali Independent University. I have a question is about the import prices. After collecting annual data from the World Bank Group from 2008 to the January 2025, I tried to examine the long-run relationship between variables such as inflation, GDP, and also the exchange rate. After doing my examination using the eView software, I found that 1% rise of exchange rate increased the import price by 0.45%. For inflation, when the inflation rise by 1%, the import price raised by the import price decreased by 0.03%, and for GDP especially, when the GDP increased by 1%, the import price raised by 1.06%. My question is about what can explain that the increase of GDP by 1% increase the import price by 1. It means that why the GDP is the key driver of the change of import price. That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can take one more question.
The first one, raising depreciation to inflation, is right.
Or we can take, yes, we have a question right there. Yes.
Thank you, Governor, Honorable Governor, for the presentation. My name is Kevin Karobia from BK Capital. And my question...
Can you speak up, please?
Thank you. Hope I'm a bit audible now. Yes, my name is Kevin Karobia from BK Capital. And my question will be directed to the Chief Economist at Minecofin. So historically, looking at Rwanda's public debt, the composition is largely external to domestic. But now, even as we saw on the presentation, we are having increased contributions from pensions. We are having also increased contributions to other saving vehicles in the financial sector, such as unit trusts, collective investment schemes. And if we looked at budget for the fiscal year, then the ratio of domestic borrowing was still remaining largely unchanged, and yet we are seeing a larger injection of capital, in as much as some of the players would want to diversify away from only government debt. But our question will be, could we see a bit more uptake of local currency, domestic debt, so as also to avoid some of these players parking a lot of cash, waiting for opportunities when the ratio of domestic debt really to external debt hasn't changed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll take those ones, Governor.
Thank you for the questions. On the question of the correlation between depreciation and inflation, as well as increase on import prices on GDP, I will ask our Chief Economist to comment on it. On the external debt and domestic borrowing issuance, I don't see Minecofin here, but I will respond it and then probably ask the CEO of Rwanda Stock Exchange what they have in the pipeline that can also be investment avenues.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor, and thank you for the question. So there are a few things that are involved here, the relationship between exchange rate, import price, inflation, and then GDP and imports. What we found in our analysis and our research is that, yes, of course, when the exchange rate depreciates, then import prices also goes up. It's because import prices are made of the price of these goods in the international market and the price on the domestic market. So you need to convert the US dollar equivalents to the Rwandan franc. That being said, we still have in our basket a relatively low share of imports, which is around 20%. Means that Rwandans consume 80% of the goods locally. This minimizes, in a way, the impact that exchange rate would have on the domestic prices. So what we see is, yes, there's an impact on the import prices, but at the end of the day, For domestic inflation, the impact is limited and it takes time. There's a lag between the moment when exchange rate depreciates and the moment when our domestic inflation is affected. And again, the impact is not one-on-one. Actually, it is much less. It is limited by the share of import in the CPI basket. That's one. On the side of real GDP, I think maybe in your analysis you can check if you're using real variables or nominal variables, because what one might expect and what is proven is that when real GDP increases, the demand, the overall domestic demand increases. Means that both domestic production is up, but also the demand for imports is up. So there's a link between the volume of imports and our domestic activity, because as we, let's say our GDP is made of, driven by things like construction, then some of the materials are not produced locally. So the demand for imports increase. But I doubt that there's a link between the GDP in real terms and the actual import prices. So it's more on the import volume side. This is what I can say. Thank you, Governor.
And on the question on external debt, one, it's true that the debt composition of government is mainly concessional loans at 80%, so which gives us really comfort on the sustainability of our debt, because this debt is repaid in very long term and also at conditional interest rates generally below 2%. We've seen that through the fiscal consolidation, domestic borrowing by government has reduced, and that partly explains the large liquidity that we see in the banking sector. However, the government, also looking at market dynamics, has decided to increase its issuance of bonds on the domestic market rather than external financing, and I think that issuance plan is now available publicly, which will give more opportunities for investment for our financial sector. Secondly, we are also working with Capital Markets Authority and the Rwanda Stock Exchange on allowing a diversity in terms of bonds and looking at conditions at which we can allow also foreign currency bonds that can be issued on our market. And this is something that we are working on and hoping by the end of the year will be clear. And that is also another avenue of investments for our financial sector, but also the retail investors. I'll probably hand over to CEO Celestin for Rwanda Stock Exchange to also give an overview of other instruments that are available on the markets.
Thank you, Governor. I think what we are working on, you just touched on it. What is happening, we are seeing a lot of liquidity in the financial sector, especially in the banking sector. So that means the lending is not as much as it should be probably, but that is related to the risks probably, or bankable projects. We see the same in the capital markets, but what we have in line, we've been working on, is to try to prepare companies and the projects to be investor ready. So that readiness, once they become, we have a project called the Capital Market Investment Clinic, which is really supporting companies, small and medium enterprises, startups, and so on, to get ready for investment. So investment could be lending, or it could be equity. But what we are not seeing is an equity culture in our economy. So even for the private issuers, we have a resistance from institutional investors, many in the banks. I understand prudential guidelines they go through, but I think we need the support for some of those institutions that go through the program successfully, maybe thinking outside the box to see how we can also develop an equity culture, because that one is very seriously lacking. Agriculture is not supported enough by the banking sector. So I think we should be looking at, what we are looking at is alternative investment opportunities, or rather avenues to support those sectors that are not being supported enough. I think that's what it is. It may be something I could precise here about what the governor just mentioned about what we are working on with the central bank, is to allow hard currency denominated instruments to be utilized in our market. What it means is that soon, once it is cleared, we will have companies who are ready but eligible to be able to raise money in hard currency where possible. and also the investors, there will be eligibility criteria that it will be allowed in this market for people who have hard currency to be able to invest in our economy in hard currency. But of course, the amategeko n'amabwiriza, of course. Thank you.
Amategeko n'amabwiriza birakurikizwa. Thank you. With your permission, Governor, we can take, maybe I see some questions online too in the room and also two online. Maybe if I could start with two online. One says, could we get clarification on the published directive governing persons permitted to transact in foreign currencies and requirements for authorization? The second one is maybe what we've been seeing around our city. Says, how is the financial sector prepared to support international visitors and leverage on the 2025 UCI Road World Championship in Rwanda for economic benefits? If we could take two in the room, and then we'll answer those. Yes.
Urakoze.
Go.
Ndamanza gushima Governor kuri presentation nziza. Ariko icya kabiri dushaka kubashima nuko mu gihe cyashize habaye sorry nibagiye kuvuga amazina yanjye. Nitwa Rurangwa Nyirimbibi, mfite akandi kazina niyongereyeho ka Patrick. Icya kabiri turabashima Governor kuri new directive mwatanze kubijyanye no kugura no kugurisha amadevize, kuko nkatwe tuba muri sector ya exchange tumaze kubona positive impact bifite kuri market yacu, kuko ujya gusanga nko mu myaka 5 ishize nibwo bwa mbere tugeze muri period ubona foreign currencies ziri stable, nta kibazo zifite kuri market. Kabazo gusa dufite ni kamwe, ni kuri spread mwadushyiriyeho kubijyanye na euros, pound, CHF, dollar Canadian. Ujya gusanga mu byukuri iriya 15 units mwadushyiriyeho ntabwo bijyanye na market, kuko market ishobora guhinduka 4, 5, 6 ku munsi, kandi exchange rate yashyizweho rimwe ku munsi. Ibyo bintu rero birimo kutugora cyane kuri market, kandi turifuza yuko biramutse bishobotse iyo directive nayo mwayisubiramo mukareba kugira ngo market yacu ikomeze igende neza. Murakoze.
Murakoze Patrick. We can take one more. Yes, we have a question in the back. Your name and all right, maybe as wait.
Chair Conte.
Okay.
Thank you so much and good morning. My name is Abi Agina, working for CNBC Africa. Thank you so much, Governor, for inviting us for this important event. Just two quick questions. My first question is on green finance. As a country, Rwanda has been charting the path in terms of pushing for sustainability-linked funds. I'd like to know what is the game plan around green funds and locking green bonds, if you could address this matter. And my second question goes to the chief economist. I'd like to know, we're seeing the economy has sort of cooled down compared to what we saw last year. Perhaps talk to me about how does this impact the country going forward in regards to also what you're seeing on the global front. Right now, we do know that the global uncertainty has continued to impact both emerging economies as well as advanced economies. I just want to know how insulated is Rwanda's economy? What buffers have you put in place, even as we look forward towards seeing what happens next when it comes to the US Fed rate, as well as the issues around the tariffs? Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. We'll take those for now.
Thank you for the questions. So probably we'll start with the question on Forex, one directive on persons authorized to transact in foreign currency. As you recall, we issued a revised regulations on the use of foreign currency when transacting in Rwanda in May 2025, so 4 months ago. And yesterday also, after broad consultations, not only with policymakers, but also the private sector federation, we issued a directive explaining, one, the businesses of nature of activities which allow people and businesses in those sectors to be able to transact in foreign currency due to the nature of their businesses. And secondly, the approval process and authorization by the central bank for other people who are not in those categories that would have valid reasons for them to transact and receive foreign currency as payments. Starting with the rationale why we had to revise the regulation on foreign exchange operations, it was after we conducted inspections, but also complaints from the general public, especially people who are renting, being commercial spaces or residential houses, and are asked by their landlords to pay in foreign currency, whereas the legal tender in Rwanda is the use of the Rwandan franc. And so we had to revise that regulation to make sure that we streamline the use of foreign currency in our country, but also avoid unnecessary demand for foreign currency while transacting in Rwanda. But we also are mindful of the fact that, one, our country has a liberalized accounts, meaning that people can have accounts in foreign currency, can transact and move funds from the country without any restrictions, as long as they respect the anti-money laundering and counter-finance terrorism regulations and laws and other due diligence, including tax regulations. And it was important that we addressed that issue, because in our inspection we had observed and found out that more than 700 contracts had been concluded in foreign currency from people who had no authorization. After consultations with private sector mainly, but also government institutions, including the Ministry of Trade and Industry, RDB, Ministry of Finance, but also the Rwanda Mining Board and Rwanda Finance, we issued a directive that gives clarity on who, as a person or business, is allowed to transact in foreign currency because of the nature of their business. One example is the tourism sector, which was already covered in the previous directive, but also looking at, for instance, the mining sector, where mining or minerals are priced internationally in foreign currency. But we also looked at, for instance, international school, but also our universities that are accommodating more and more and attracting international students. We looked at members of the Kigali International Financial Center, as well as members of the Kigali International Arbitration Center. So there's a wide array of sectors, due to the nature of their activities, that can and are allowed to transact in foreign currency under certain conditions. But the guiding principle is that no one residing or being a citizen of Rwanda should be forced or denied to pay in local currency. So we believe that these behavioral malpractices that we had seen in the market will be alleviated through the revised regulation and directive. We have also received some queries and concerns from foreign investors, and we had to clear the confusion that the liberalization of accounts is still maintained. There's no change to that as per the investment codes, and the capital accounts is also liberalized under the conditions and the regulations that I mentioned. Also, the last thing is to make sure that people who in good faith actually had contracted in foreign currency without knowledge, we've given a transition period of 6 months to make sure that they can renegotiate their contracts. And this directive and regulation are followed out by an extensive awareness campaign and engagement with private sector so that we monitor how implementation of this new regulation is being conducted and be able to also adjust it if there are any sectors that we may have not seen or that will justify also be the authorization to transact in foreign currency. So in a nutshell, that's the clarification, and since the directive is new, I wanted to give that extensive explanation and clarifications. Secondly, on the ikibazo mwabajije kuri spread cyangwa directive yashyizeho spread, ni ukuvuga ikinyuranyo hagati y'ikiguzi n'uko mucuruza amadovize. Nibyo koko nkuko twari twabiganiriye byaba na Rwanda Bankers Association y'amabanki cyangwa ya Forex Bureau, twagira ngo havemo izo malpractices abantu bashobora kugurisha amadovize ku giciro kiri hejuru cyane. Ikindi nuko twari twabonye ko haba mu karere cyangwa se no bindi bihugu ibyo kugurisha amadovize ntago banki nkuru z'ibihugu na banki nkuru y'u Rwanda irimo wabireka ngo abantu bashaka kugurisha amadovize ku giciro kiri hejuru cyane gihanitse kitajyanye n'isoko, utabishyizemo amabwiriza ntabwo isoko ryagenda neza. Kandi dushimiye yuko mwanashimye ko amavugururwa yagiye ajyamo, tugenda tubona ko isoko ry'ivunjisha naryo ndetse n'ifaranga y'u Rwanda ubona yuko kitagita agaciro cyane. Na amavugurura gikomeza, kandi nagira ngo mbizeze yuko nkuko twari twabivuze tugiye gutanga aya mabwiriza mashya, nuko nyuma y'amezi 3 twongera kureba ingaruka yaba yateye kuri iryo soko ry'ivunjisha. Mu cyumweru gitaha nateganyijwe inama n'ibiganiro byaba n'amabanki cyangwa se Forex Bureau kugira ngo turebe icyaya mabwiriza mutangiye kuyashyira mu bikorwa ingaruka yaba zaragize. Twumvise koko ku bijyanye na madovize atari amadolari, iyo spread y'amafaranga 15 y'u Rwanda mutagomba kurenza hagati y'igiciro mwaguriyeho amadovize n'icyo mugurishijeho, ko haba harimo imbogamizi. Ibyo rero nabyo tuzabyigaho ku buryo hagombye kuba hari uko twavugurura ayo mabwiriza tumaze kubumva nabyo byakorwa. Abo muri Forex Bureau menya aribo bishimye kurusha abandi. On the question on impact of UCI and how we are supporting international visitors, as well on the question on green finance, I will let our Deputy Governor Nick respond to that. And then there was another question for the Chief Economist on impact of global GDP slowdown. Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Governor. Now, let's appreciate that UCI championship happening in Rwanda on the continent for the first time is something very historic. But the financial sector is well prepared, I would say, to meet the needs of international guests and the participants. And I would say from 3 perspectives. One, in terms of readiness to serve and meet their financial needs. We have infrastructure to be able to accept international cards. We have digital payments that have been put in place, and as we've heard, we also have forexes that are able to meet the needs of the participants that are engaged in the world cycling. 2, as you saw from the governor's statement, the financial sector is also supporting the other sectors that complement these kind of events, be it hospitality, be it transport, either from financing their needs and also from insuring them. That's the other perspective that I would look at it. Third is also to appreciate that events such as this give an opportunity not only for the financial sector, but also for the country to showcase its readiness, to showcase its ability as a regional hub for finance, for investments, and for innovation. So all to say is that I do not see this as a one-off sporting event, as the cyclists are competing on our roads. It's an opportunity to demonstrate the resilience of the financial sector, the investments that are being done, and the robustness of the financial sector. That's the response I would provide. Now, coming to the question by CNBC Africa on green finance, we need to appreciate it from three perspectives. One, what policy initiatives are being done. Two, in terms of competencies, what are we doing? And three, in terms of products and services. Now, steps have been done. One, from policy, we now have a sustainable finance roadmap. You must have seen last week there was the launch of the green taxonomy. These are policy initiatives that need to be in place. There are also initiatives being done in building the competencies, because if you're going to attract green finance, you need to see that the mediators of capital have the competencies too. So this is an ongoing initiative in terms of building competencies, then come up with products and services to be able to attract that capital. We're already seeing sustainability-linked bonds, green bonds that are being issued on the capital market. We are seeing equity funds that are setting up, but there is much more that we expect and that is being done. In a nutshell, we need to have a policy framework. It's there, it's robust, but it's always work in progress. Two, we need to build competencies for those who are going to mediate that capital in terms of products and services. And a lot is being done, but there is much more to be expected. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Governor.
Yes, thank you, Governor. On the question related to the link between the global economy and our domestic economy, what I can say is basically, as you saw in the slides, our economy is being resilient to shocks. Since the COVID-19 period where we had a negative growth, every year you can see 9, 8, 7% growth. This is very good in the context we are in. Actually, the global growth is around 3%, and the sub-Saharan African growth is around 4%. With that, in that region of sub-Saharan Africa, our region, EAC, is more than 5% on average. So let's say we are in the region that is growing very fast compared to the rest of the world, and Rwanda has the highest growth in that region. So our economy really is resilient to these shocks because it's driven by sectors that are in line with efforts to build infrastructure, like construction. It's driven by sectors linked with tourism, for example, hotels, restaurants, and all other sub-sectors in the services sector that are linked with that. So I can say from an economic point of view, we are really resilient from a GDP point of view. Where our economy has been affected is on inflation in 2022 and 2023 following the war in Ukraine. That's the major shock that affected our domestic inflation. But after that, our inflation is also stable within the target band. So I would say that yes, there are risks, but we are monitoring them. And since the beginning of the year, what is happening on the side of international tariff put in place by the US, has not really affected the African economies because of the limited direct trade relationships between most of the countries and the US. What can impact our economies in Africa is if international commodity prices are changing. And this is what we are monitoring. But so far, all points towards a decline in both energy commodities and non-energy commodities. So with that, this gives us confidence that at least the baseline scenario, which is the most likely to happen, is no major impact on the what is happening globally and these uncertainties, and what's happening locally and domestically in our inflation. But because we cannot forecast with 100% precision what's going to happen in the future, we always highlight as a risk that if something unusual happens, that could affect our economies in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor, with your permission, we'll take 2 questions in the room and then we'll move on. We have a question from the Minister. And also, yeah.
Thank you, Governor. Well, my question is on agriculture. I think we saw from the data that financing of agriculture is probably the lowest compared to other sectors. And yet we saw that agriculture has potential in terms of exports, agriculture and mining, which you stated. So we saw that there's a lot of domestic capital there and reduced lendings. So how do we, I think we need to have a dialogue to see how we can capitalize the financial flows into agriculture sector. We had a meeting here a couple of weeks ago with the financial institutions and agri-exporters. So they raised a number of issues of access to finance. And when you talk to the banks, they tell you they have the liquidity. So we have to see how we can bridge that gap between the two. But the issues that came to the forefront included the risks that are related to the sector. But I know that our financial sector has moved tremendously in terms of putting safeguards in place, such as agriculture insurance. And we have gone into ensuring that we minimize the risks through irrigation, through agriculture insurance, and so on. There are guarantees for people going to agriculture, concession loans. So there are a number of instruments, I think, in place. But I think what's missing is being able to have that convergence. Governor, I just want to end this. It's not really a question, but it's a concern that I'm raising that comes from the statistics. That maybe we need to meet the financial sector and those who are in agriculture and see how we can create a connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Hello. Thank you, Honorable Governor. My name is Felix Mundimana. I'm the CEO of Jali Finance and the chairperson of Non-Deposit Taking Financial Institution Association. My main question is about the revision of the electricity pricing that the government is considering. Given that our pilot role in the penetration of mainly electric motorcycles and e-mobility in general, we've been looking at electricity in a wide view that goes over the nice view that some countries have of being nice and contributing to the global issue, but particularly for our country, we've seen some frauds that are coming up on one side, but we've always had the hope that the penetration of electricity in NABOT green solution could replace widely the import of petroleum products. Given the upward revision of the pricing of electricity, are the central bank concerned about about the negative impact that can have on that hope that we had to both tackle the environmental issue, but also tackle the import-export trade balance. That's one main question. And the last kind request about the sector of non-deposit taking financial institution is that we inherited the reputation risk, given that most people are seeing us as the former practitioner of shark lending or bank Lambert. We had that, and I would kindly request that that narrative can be changed from the central bank, labeling us in other ways, and not because they are institutions like mine, and institution with a very nice background holds more than 90% of the total asset of the sector, but there are some other actors, but who came to report to the central bank. That means they are willing to do good in the future. So if that narrative can change from the central bank itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We can maybe take one more, Governor?
Yes,
all right. Yeah, we'll take one more. I can see one there. Your name?
Bonjour à tous, moi c'est Jury Laga, étudiante en faculté de sciences économie à ULK. L'honneur m'est choix aujourd'hui de me présenter devant vous avec un grand honneur, suivant l'allocution de Madame Soraya, le gouverneur de la Banque centrale. Donc c'est la deuxième fois pour moi aujourd'hui d'assister à sa brillante prestation sur la Monetary Policy of Rwanda. Donc aujourd'hui j'avais une question pour vous. J'ai une question pour vous. Quelle est la stratégie de la Banque nationale du Rwanda pour stabiliser le franc rwandais face aux fluctuations des devises étrangères? Merci.
Merci. Yeah, thank you so much. I think I saw one more hand up. Yes, there is one here, so we can maybe take those.
Thank you. My name is Mathieu Ruereka. I would like to ask a question about the pension sector. We highly appreciate the encouraging growth. We saw a 108% increase over 1 year. It basically means people are trusting more that their pensions could actually contribute to their future. And this comes in the context that as a person contributes to pension, they believe that there are three options. If they continue to save over 15 years, they can either get an early reimbursement or wait until their age comes. And this is actually an assurance provided that at a certain level, the savings are going to mature back to the persons. The question I would like to ask was at which extent that assurance can be bankable, and what the central bank thinks of regulating pension savings in the future as an acceptable collateral in the banking sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take those ones, Governor. Right, I think we'll take those ones for now, and we'll move on.
Thank you for the very good questions. Starting with comments and requests from the Honorable Minister, Mark, Minister of Agriculture. I could not agree more. There needs to be more ways and more engagements to make sure that the financing of the agriculture sector increases. We were half happy that at least we see agriculture now coming in the top 10 sectors that are financed, but as we've seen, the financing is still less than 3% of the total outstanding loan portfolio. And so we would welcome that deeper engagements, not only with the banking sector, but also the insurance sector, to make sure that products that are developed for the agriculture sector, as well as risk mitigating schemes, especially through, for instance, the National Agriculture Insurance Scheme, can allow us as Rwanda to fund better the agriculture sector, which, as we know, contribute close to 25% to our GDP, but employs more than 70% of our population. So as Central Bank, we are ready to facilitate those conversations, but also to look at other instruments that would allow more financing to the agriculture sector. But I have also the chairman of the Rwanda Bankers Association in front of me. If he has any comments to make, that would be appreciated. Chairman.
Can we have a microphone?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you so much for the presentation. The Minister for Agriculture, thank you for the question, or the concern, not a question. I know we have had engagements at different fora targeted at arriving at a working mechanism to channel financial resources to agriculture. I think the challenge we still have, first of all, agriculture remaining very fragmented, channeling a lot of resources to agriculture continues to be a challenge. I know at the bank's level, the banks that I and my colleagues lead, many of us have agriculture units that look at potential projects to fund. There are obviously risks, just like with other sectors. We've attempted to look at both risk mitigation measures, but also the cost of funding compared to margins of the agriculture activities. And I know there's a lot of things we discussed with the ministry for different value chains. I think what needs to happen now is to consolidate all those into projects, bankable projects, at a level that can be scaled, but not just for the production sector only, but also value addition, because that's how the sector will make money. But we welcome, Honourable Minister, an opportunity with the bankers in the room to have a conversation on what can be done. We have ideas, and I think many of them will be discussed. Honourable Governor, I think given the 3% we've seen is a step in the right direction. I have all the confidence that if we bring these together, we should be able to continue to see more money going into the agriculture sector, using technology as well. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, CEO.
So we'll continue with the question on electricity tariffs and what as Central Bank we see as probably risk to that. And that I will ask probably the Chief Economist to comment. Then the question on non-deposit taking financial institutions. First, I think we need to clarify, as Central Bank, we don't consider the sector as former Banque Lambert. This is a regulated subsector, and we are happy to see that close to 80 non-deposit taking financial institutions, especially lending companies, have been licensed. But I do agree that there has to be more awareness of exactly what the sector is bringing, because it responds to the needs of clients and consumers, that are clients of these non-deposit taking financial institution, one for short-term loans, but also for the quick turnaround on these loans. So it's a subsector that's growing. The regulation is 3-year-old, and we are revising it to make sure that we can strengthen your sector. And we really welcome and appreciate the association that has been put in place so that we can engage more directly and address the concerns of the non-deposit taking financial institution. So rest assured that we are very committed to supporting the sector and making sure that it continues to grow. And one concern that we had, but we have come to an understanding, is where some of the institutions, when they come to apply for licenses with very high interest rates on their products, which we've really signified our concern on that, and making sure that as much as we want those short-term loans and the quick turnaround, that it doesn't come at a cost that's unaffordable for the consumers and Rwandan citizens. But rest assured, and I see your regulator, our acting ED for Financial Sector Development and Market Conduct, is here as well to make sure that you can engage him regularly for any concerns, but myself and the Deputy Governor are also available to address your concerns. But this is a sector that we really see is growing, and as I mentioned in my presentation, also contributing to underserved sectors, financing, including agriculture, where we've seen that it's in the top 5 of sectors that you're financing. Probably I'll go to the question on the pension sector. True, the large contribution that we see gives confidence. One, responding to the need to first have a sustainable public pension fund, and looking also at the, I would say, increase in life expectancy, which is really good. And so the projections are that as people live longer, they will also benefit from their pension savings for a longer period. It's something to celebrate as a country, but also making sure that people who retire can do so in dignity and make sure that the savings and the benefits that they receive allow them to maintain a decent lifestyle. These long-term savings, unfortunately, we've had a lot of questions around whether people can be allowed to actually tap into their savings even before they get to retirement age. Secondly, it's also a conversation even in advanced economies. Can I use the savings that I have as collateral to get a loan? But we have to be very cautious and careful about using such long-term savings that are done to make sure that once we retire and we no longer have, that we don't have, at a time where we don't have income because we are no longer employed, that then a fraction of those savings have actually gone into loans, or if for any unfortunate reason the person is not able to reimburse their loans, what that means is the savings that they had accumulated for their pension is actually reduced. And so these are really some of the factors that make central banks and financial regulators be very reluctant to allow people to use their pension benefits as collateral. However, as we save towards our pension, there are also other investments that can be made, long-term investment and saving products that can be considered as probably collateral. And I think as we see our market developing and offering more of those investment products, then that could be an answer to the question you raised on how people can use their saving instruments to go towards some of the loans they have. But for now, it would really be, I think, not a prudent way to manage savings that would go to retirement. There was a last question, question en français. Sur la politique ou les mesures qui ont été prises par la Banque nationale du Rwanda pour stabiliser le franc rwandais. Comme nous l'avons indiqué durant notre présentation, c'est vrai qu'on a vu que les 6 premiers mois de l'année, le franc rwandais s'est stabilisé avec une dépréciation à moins de 3%. Et l'on voit que les 3 dernières années, on avait eu en 2023 et 2024 une dépréciation qui était au-delà des dépréciations annuelles qu'on avait l'habitude de voir, au-delà de 5%, avec même une inflation une dépréciation en 2023 de 18%, qui était due principalement à la hausse du dollar américain après la hausse des taux d'intérêt par la Réserve fédérale, mais aussi une je dirais, des importations plus larges et des exportations qui étaient, je dirais, modérées. Aujourd'hui, la tendance s'est réversée puisque nous avons eu, dans les premiers 6 mois de l'année, en termes d'export, une hausse de 6% sur les 6 mois de l'année, mais aussi, si on regarde les 3 mois d'avril à juin, nos exports ont augmenté de 15,5%. Les importations ont continué d'augmenter, mais à un niveau moins élevé, et donc notre balance commerciale s'est améliorée, si je puis dire, surtout le deuxième trimestre de l'année 2025, et cela a renforcé la monnaie puisque la demande pour les devises étrangères était moindre et que nous avions plus de rentrées à devises étrangères. Deuxième raison pour la stabilisation du franc rwandais, ça a été des politiques de réforme excusez-moi, de notre marché de change. Et cela a permis aussi d'éliminer beaucoup de spéculation sur notre monnaie et de pouvoir stabiliser le marché de change. Et dernière raison, c'est aussi ce qui se passe sur les marchés internationaux avec un dollar américain moins fort, spécialement durant la période où les tarifs douaniers ont été annoncés par l'administration américaine. Et donc ce sont ces 3 facteurs qui ont permis la stabilisation du franc rwandais. Et nous sommes vraiment très confiants que même dans les mois à venir, quand on regarde spécialement l'évolution de nos exports, et spécialement que ce soit l'export des marchandises, mais on n'a pas parlé aussi des exports de services où on voit aussi une hausse, cela nous permettra de continuer à stabiliser le franc rwandais. Merci.
Yes, on the question related to electricity tariff and the links with transport and green transport, I understand also the link and the concern and the interest from the chairperson of non-deposit taking financial institutions, given the interest they have in the sector and electric motorbikes. But what I can say is, one, you've seen probably that yesterday Rura announced new tariff for electricity. And probably, if it's not already the case, there'll be more engagement and communication by the respective ministries about the reasons for this change. What I can note is that this electricity tariff has been stable for a very long period of time, actually for a period even before the COVID-19 pandemic. The reasons for this revision will be explained more in detail, but it has to do with the increasing the capacity of the government to generate more electricity in the future and be able to sustain and satisfy the demand as our economy is growing. As you know, access to electricity went all the way up to 85% in 2025 for Rwandan households, and it was much, much lower 25 years ago, and in some cases around 10-12%. So what is the impact? The first thing is we have incorporated these numbers in our forecast, and what is being presented today, 7.1% inflation for 2025 already has this revision in electricity tariff within it, within its assumptions. What it means is that our inflation is expected to remain within the band, including these changes. That's the main thing. Second, regarding imports, there are other policies that are in place, including tax exemptions for electric vehicles, full electric vehicles, that has also fast-tracked them or increased the appetite or the demand for these electric vehicles, electric motorcycles or electric cars. These are still there, which is giving an advantage to importing electric vehicles versus those who are using traditional fuel, which are using traditional fuel. We've seen continuous increase in electric vehicles importation, and the use of these electric vehicles in our transport system is actually leading to lower demand, or at least reducing the increase at which the demand for fuel is growing in the country. What it means is that the impact that you are referring to, meaning we use more green transport and we are having less imports, or let's say a lower growth in the imports of fuel, this is a trend that we expect to see continuing because of these tax exemptions that are there, but also the advantage or the difference between the consumption, everyday consumption when you use fuel versus when you use electricity, even with the new tariff. So I don't think there will be a major impact there. So in a nutshell, what I can say is that yes, the electricity tariff have been increased for reasons that are justified, and the impact on inflation will be contained. We'll still have inflation within the band, and the positive impact it has on imports through reducing the demand for fuel will continue. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone. I know we have many questions and I keep seeing them coming in online, but I think for now I would like to request you to allow me to ask our panel and also applaud our panel for this interactive session, and as they take their seats. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Deputy Governor. And thank you to the Chief Economist. And we'll keep engaging with you online, and I will keep responding to some of these questions that keep coming. And we value your feedback. Feel free to share with us your feedback of the event and what we can improve. Over the years, we have witnessed the journey of money in Rwanda, from cards to cash to mobile money. Each step marked with progress, yet also another step left behind by challenges. The systems remained disconnected, costs were high, and time was often lost. But today, however, we want to see a new chapter, one that brings banks, mobile wallets, businesses, government, and citizens on a single, instant, and accessible platform. This is more than a payment platform, and it's about inclusion. It's about breaking barriers and reshaping the story of how money moves in Rwanda and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, let's turn our eyes to the screen and meet eCash.
For generations, money in Rwanda moved through cash, but cash had challenges. It was unsafe, hard to move, costly to handle. Then came cards, but not everyone had one, and not every shop had a POS. Mobile money followed, bringing convenience, but it came with its own charges, phone access barriers, and limited coverage. Even with banks and mobile wallets, systems did not communicate with each other. If you're on MTN, you couldn't send to Airtel. Banks didn't settle instantly. People still walked or traveled to cash out, losing time and money. Mobile money operations faced heavy bilateral integration costs just to connect with banks. And so, bank-to-bank transfers weren't instant, and merchant payments were locked in closed-loop systems, meaning limited acceptance, leaving cash as more competitive option. That's why Rwanda built eCash, a national digital payments platform connecting every bank, SACCO, MFI, wallet, and fintech into one ecosystem, instant, secure, inclusive, which makes it convenient. The result speaks for themselves. Over 42.7 million transactions have been processed, amounting to a total value of Rwandan francs 175.7 billion. With 2.1 million active users, transaction volumes are increasing by a monthly average of 10% since eCash inception. For financial institutions, eCash is a game changer. Faster liquidity, cheaper settlement, expanded customer reach, banks gain scale, SACCOs and MFIs bridge rural clients to national economy. Fintechs innovate without heavy infrastructure costs. For citizens, it means freedom. Today, people can send and receive instantly across networks. Additional services such as P2B, bill payments, and cross-border transactions are under integration and development. And Rwanda isn't stopping its borders. Through regional links, eCash will tap into 490 million remittance market and enable seamless trade across Africa. For businesses and citizens alike, money will flow without friction. eCash is not stopping there. Government services are being integrated, and the ability to cash in and cash out from any financial institution or any store buy is being made possible. From cash to cards to mobile money, every step moved us forward. eCash upgrades payment for every plug-in once, reach everyone. It enables different systems to work together, so people can pay anywhere while providers run learner and grow margins. Instant, secure, inclusive.
And to tell us more about eCash, it is my pleasure to invite on stage Blaise Pascal Gasabira, the CEO of R-Switch. You're welcome, Blaise.
Honorable Governor, distinguished guests, good morning, and I'm glad to be here. And I would like to start by thanking the Governor for giving me this opportunity to share about this exciting government initiative, which is eCash. So if you recall in the last, and this was presented here, the last 15 years, we've seen a significant growth in terms of digital payment. We've seen mobile money, mobile banking, online banking growing, but mostly driven by mobile money activities. And we saw the impact in the economy. Then came COVID. And when COVID came, we realized that the market still had some gaps. And some of the gaps were, we realized that between banks, we couldn't have instant payment. So you couldn't move money instantly if you wanted to pay someone else from one bank to another. If this was on wallet, let's say Airtel to MTN and vice versa, you had to go through an agent, which means transiting to cash and turn it into a digital payment. And for other players that wanted to enter in the market, you also had to integrate, negotiate with each institution to be able to deploy your product. And that's how the initiative from the government came to put in place an infrastructure, a public infrastructure. Consider this as a highway connecting multiple roads and cities. The goal is to ensure that one, from wherever institution that you are in, whatever service provider that you are using, you should be able to pay, and you should not be refused any service when you have that platform. That would allow us to go slowly into a cash-light economy. And so far, where we are, we've deployed already 2 use cases. The first use case is P2P. And here, you can now, from whatever bank or digital wallet that you currently have, you can send money to someone else who's in another bank or mobile money instantly. The next use case that we launched in February was merchant interoperability. As you know today, when you have a card and you go to a POS, the merchant doesn't ask you which card are you using and which bank is behind. The POS is agnostic, indifferent, and you transact. But when we come to digital payment, mobile payment today, you'll realize that you have to be in the same ecosystem to be able to transact as a mobile payment. The idea is to replicate the same. How can, with the same USSD code that the merchant has, they can receive payment and be indifferent to whatever the service provider, digital financial service provider that you're using. We've already integrated on P2P all banks, all commercial banks and all mobile money operators. We have about 21 participants. We also have MFIs, SACCOs, the largest SACCOs. We expect to have district SACCOs by end of October. And today on P2P, we transact on average, on a monthly, we transact about 13 billion. And we've already processed 175 billion in terms of value. And we see it growing, which is a sign that people are benefiting from this infrastructure. And we see this becoming now the daily life of every citizen. What we have ahead is also to deploy other use cases, which would be G2P, government payment, bulk payment, as well as cash in, cash out, where if you have cash and you want to convert it into digital account and wallet, from any agent that you'll see, you'll be able to transact or withdraw. So my ask today is the infrastructure is here. It's a public infrastructure for all the financial institutions, available real-time 24/7 for you to serve better your client and also be able to scale quite rapidly some of the products that currently you have and probably that were challenged by the fragmentation that we see and we used to have in our market. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaise. And we can really see clearly the possibilities ahead in terms of payment and for our country and also beyond. As we draw to the close of this morning's session, allow me now to invite the Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda to deliver his closing remarks. Welcome, DG.
I know I'm in between you, breakfast or other pending meetings, so I'm going to keep this very brief. Allow me to say, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, fellow stakeholders, all protocols observed. As we conclude today's engagement, let me share with you 3 reflections. First, we reaffirm the National Bank of Rwanda's unwavering commitment to maintain price stability, safeguarding financial stability, ensuring that the monetary policy continues to serve the resilience and inclusive growth of our economy. The trust of Rwandans in their currency and in the financial system remains our most valuable asset. Second, we recognize the strength and adaptability of our financial sector. Despite global headwinds, Rwanda's financial system continues to expand, innovate, and deepen its role in financing the real economy. This is not by chance. It is a product of sound policies, prudent regulation, and strong collaboration across stakeholders. Third, we look ahead with determination. The future of Rwanda's financial sector will be defined by innovation, digital transformation, and sustainability. We will continue to build an ecosystem that is modern, inclusive, and resilient. And as the governor said, one that empowers households, supports businesses, and strengthens our country's position in the region and the global financial landscape.
In closing, I want to thank all stakeholders from government institutions, captains of our financial sector, developmental partners, and the media for your contributions today and your partnership in the work ahead. Last but not least, the Governor, the staff of the National Bank of Rwanda, the work that we've done tirelessly to prepare and organize this event is greatly acknowledged. Together, we remain vigilant, agile, and ambitious. Rwanda's financial system would not only weather today's challenges, but should also seize tomorrow's opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. I too will not stand in the way of you and the next engagement, but I will invite us to continue some of these conversations right outside this room. We've organized a cocktail to keep these conversations going and engaging. And today's presentations will be shared online on our social media platforms and on our website. Also, you can use the hashtag MPFSS and you can be able to find them online once you search. Thank you so much for our media partners. We'll have a press conference right after this session. I'm Bob Alan, and it's been a great honor to be a Master of Ceremonies today. I wish you a very good day, afternoon, oh yeah, it's still morning. A very good morning. Thank you so much. Again, we value your feedback, so feel free to share with us your feedback by scanning the QR code on the screen. Thank you so much. Murakoze cyane. Allow me to invite the governor of the National Bank of Rwanda, the deputy governor, the chief economist, to take the stage, and also we start the press conference. Tugiye gutangira ikiganiro n'abanyamakuru kiri bwibande kuri presentation ya governor uyu munsi. Ndaza gusaba yuko ababaza bivuga amazina yabo na media house bakorera. Murakoze cyane. Reka duhere kuri Placide RBA.
Yes. Murakoze cyane nyakubahwa gavana. Mfite ibibazo bibiri. Icyambere ndifuza ko utubwira muri rusange irizamuka rya 7.2 by'umusaruro mbumbe muri amezi 6 abanza muri uyu mwaka, aho mwabonye byaturutse. Ubwo ni mu nzego zitandukanye z'ubukungu, ndetse twanabonye ku mibare yo gukoresha ikoranabuhanga mu guhererekanya amafaranga e-cash byarazamutse ku gipimo cya 302% mu kwishyurana muri ubwo buryo bakabigeranya n'umusaruro mbumbe w'igihugu. Turifuza kumenya icyo bivuze by'umwihariko mu bukungu bw'igihugu. Hanyuma ikindi kibazo ndifuza ko deputy governor yagisubiza mu Kinyarwanda, aho yagerageje kugaragaza irushanwa ry'isi ry'amagare, icyo mubona nk'inyungu ku Rwanda mu bukungu bw'u Rwanda muri rusange. Murakoze.
Murakoze Placide. Miss Governor.
Mbere yuko nsubiza wenda ndabanza kubasuhuza. Mwiriwe neza. Ikibazo Placide abajije kuri umusaruro mbumbe w'igihugu cyangwa uko ubukungu bwacu bwifashe muri aya mezi 6 ya mbere y'umwaka kuva mu kwa mbere kugeza mu kwa gatandatu, ni umubare ushimishije kuko umusaruro mbumbe ubukungu bw'igihugu wiyongereyeho 7.2%. Bishimishije kubera ko iyo urebye ku rwego rw'isi, mwabonye ko umusaruro mbumbe ku rwego rw'isi uteganyijwe kuzazamukaho gusa 3% muri uyu mwaka w'2025, ndetse no mu karere ka Afrika, mu karere turimo Sub-Saharan Africa, nako umusaruro mbumbe w'ibihugu bigize akarere kacu uzazamukaho gusa 4%. Kubona rero ubukungu bw'u Rwanda buzamukaho 7.2% mu mezi 6 ya mbere y'umwaka ni ikintu gishimishije, aho tubona yuko hagiye bamo ukwiyongera cyane ku bukungu. Ni urwego mbere na mbere urwego rwa serivisi rwiyongereyeho 9.4%, rugakurikirwa n'urwego rw'inganda harimo aho ngaho n'urwego rw'ubwubatsi kuri 8.8%, hanyuma n'urwego rw'ubuhinzi bwiyongereyeho 1.7%. Ariko icyagaragaye ni uko urwego rw'ubuhinzi ufasha amezi 3 ya nyuma y'igice cya mbere cy'umwaka cyangwa igihembwe cya kabiri kuva mu kwa 4 kugeza mu kwa 6, n'urwego rw'ubuhinzi rwiyongereyeho 8%. Ni ukuvuga rero ko inzego zose z'ubukungu zakomeje gutanga umusaruro ushimishije. Ikindi cyanagaragaye muri iyi mibare ni urugero rwiza rw'ibyo twohereza mu mahanga byiyongereyeho 6.2%. Ibyo rero biraduha icyizere ku bukungu bwacu, ku gukomeza kwiyongera k'umusaruro mbumbe, ndetse byiyongera kurusha n'ibindi bihugu byo mu karere ka Afrika cyangwa se by'isi. Ku byerekeranye no kwishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga, nibyo koko iyo urebye amafaranga yose yishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga ubamaze gukwikuba nk'inshuro 3 umusaruro mbumbe wose w'igihugu kuri 3.2% iyo turebye amezi 6 ya mbere y'umwaka. Ni ikigero rero cyerekana ko iyi gahunda ya leta ya cashless yitabiriwe, ndetse mwabonye ko n'uyu munsi twabagaragarije ikoranabuhanga mu kwishyurana ryashyizweho na leta e-cash, rituma abantu bose yaba ufite telefone ya MTN cyangwa se ya Airtel bashobora kwishyurana batagombye kongera gukora cash out, ni ukuvuga kuba bakura amafaranga kuri MTN yari afite akongera akajya kuyatanga ku mu agent wa Airtel. Iryo huzwa ry'ikoranabuhanga mu kwishyurana binyuze muri e-cash nabyo mwabonye ko bimaze gutera umusaruro ushimishije, ariko wenda twaha ijambo na CEO wa R-Switch akaza kuduha mu mibare aho bageze, aho e-cash igeze mu guteza imbere urwego rwo kwishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga. CEO Blaise.
Governor muranyumva. Icyo navuga nuko muri iyi myaka ibiri twabonye kuko ikoreshwa rya e-cash rizamuka mu buryo nko mu myaka 3 ishize guhera mu 2022 aribwo twatangiye iki gikorwa duhuza ibigo bibiri. Icyo gihe yari MTN na Airtel. Twagiye tubona umubare wiyongera ariko uza kwiyongeraho cyane mu 2023 na 4 banks zose zimaze kujya kuri uno muyoboro wa e-cash. N'ubu ngubu turateganya yuko ikindi cyiciro ni icya Sacco district, Sacco zo mu ma district yuko nazo zizajya kuri uno muyoboro. Ku munsi tugenda tubona tuba dufite umubare w'abantu bageze kuri miliyoni bagenda buri munsi batumanaho amafaranga bakoresheje uno muyoboro cyangwa se rino koranabuhanga. Ikindi kintu navuga nuko tujya gutangira twatinzemo gato, ariko kuko byasabaga yuko buri muturage aba ari we wiyandikisha kugira ngo ashobore kuba yakoresha e-cash. Mu gufatanya hamwe na banki nkuru y'igihugu haza kwemezwa yuko noneho buri bakiriya bose b'ibigo navuga financial institutions na mobile money bose bajya kuri e-cash kugira ngo ntihagire umuntu ujya ubura uko yohereza undi amafaranga. Ubu ngubu icyo nicyo cyiciro cya mbere. Icyiciro cya kabiri twatangije muri uno mwaka nicyo noneho kuba umuntu yashobora kuba yakwishyura abo twita aba merchant cyangwa se abacuruzi babandi baba bafite USSD code, ku buryo umuntu aho waba uri hose ushobora kuba wakwishyura, nk'uko umuntu ashobora gutumanaho yishyura ava muri Airtel ajya muri MTN cyangwa se MTN ajya muri Airtel. Icyiciro gikurikiraho nuko noneho umuntu yashobora no kuba ageze imbere y'umuntu ucuruza ariko akorera abitsa muri MTN tuvuge, we umurongo ariho ari umurongo wa Airtel, kuba yashobora kumwishyura. Ubu kuri uno munsi ntabwo turabigeraho, dufite gusa BK na GT Bank n'indi fintech yitwa MVend nibo bashoboye kujya kuri iryo koranabuhanga, ariko turateganya yuko uno mwaka uzarangira n'ibigo byose noneho byamaze kujya kuri uwo murongo.
Murakoze Blaise.
Deputy Governor ku kibazo cya UCI.
Wakoze Placide. Kamanze mvuge yuko nk'Abanyarwanda nk'Abanyafrika iri rushanwa ni ikintu twishimira, kiri mu kuduteza ishema, kumva yuko ari bwo bwa mbere riri mu kuba muri Afurika. Ni ikintu twishimira, tugomba kumva yuko twese kiduteje ishema, tutari Abanyarwanda ariko n'Abanyafrika twese. Noneho iyo bije muri financial sector tubibona mu buryo butatu. Ubwa mbere ni ukugaragaza ukuntu financial sector yacu imaze gukura kandi initeguye. Ko irushanwa nk'iri ngiri riba ririmo abantu baturutse mu bihugu bitandukanye, ariko n'igihe bari mu Rwanda bakenera kugira financial transactions bakora, kubera kuntu twiteguye, kubera ishoramari rimaze gushorwa muri financial sector yacu. Ubu umuntu waza mu rugero akoresha Visa, Mastercard, izi card zikoreshwa ku isi, birashoboka yuko yaza akishyura hoteli, akishyura muri restaurant n'izindi services zose yakenera. Ariko nk'uko na Brice yabivugaga, usibye noneho na cards hari na digital payments na fintechs dufite. Akaba ari ikintu cya mbere kigaragaza iterambere financial sector yacu imaze kugeraho, ku buryo isavinga needs za international travelers baza mu Rwanda, bakaba bakomeza n'ubuzima bwabo na bibazo bahuye nabyo. Cyo ngicyo akaba ari icya mbere. Icya kabiri, financial sector ifasha na sectors zindi. Urugero, aba bantu bari mu kuza muri irushanwa bari mu kujya mu mahoteli, bari mu gukoresha amamodoka, bari mu gukoresha services zitandukanye. Nk'uko byagaragaye, urebye lending to different sectors iri mu kugrowing. Akaba ariyo nkunga yindi ya kabiri, financial sector iri mu gufasha muri the real economy kugira ngo dukomeze kwitegura kwakira amarushanwa nk'aya ngaya n'izindi events ziba mpuzamahanga mu Rwanda. Icya gatatu, iri rushanwa y'ukurikiranya amateka yaryo riraza kuba rikurikiranwa n'abantu benshi ku isi. Ni amahirwe kuri financial sector, ni amahirwe ku gihugu cyacu kugaragaza iterambere tumaze kugeraho, kugaragaza byendi muribuka mu minsi isize nahoze ndi CEO wa Kigali International Financial Center, tuvuga yuko turi mu gutegura u Rwanda kugira ngo rube igicumbi cy'imari mu Rwanda, muri Afurika no ku isi. Aya rero ni amahirwe tuba tugize kuba dufite abantu baza bakanabibona, bakabitestinga, bakumva yuko atari amagambo. Nibyo bintu bitatu mbona irushanwa ritumarira, usibye muri financial sector, in the real economy, noneho twese nk'igihugu n'intumbero dufite n'ibikorwa dushaka kugeraho. Murakoze.
Murakoze cyane Deputy Governor. Yego, fata ikindi kibazo.
Je m'adresse à Madame la Gouverneure. Selon les statistiques récentes, le taux d'inflation est de 6%. Les causes sont multiples, vous les connaissez plus que moi. Selon votre position, quelle est la stratégie avancée par la BNR pour éradiquer à jamais, car ça cause la hausse des prix, en bref la vie chère? Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Kadufata ikindi kibazo. Amazina yawe na media house.
Murakoze. Nitwa Cyubahiro Gasabira Gad, ndi umunyamakuru wo kuri Flash TV. Mfite ibibazo bibiri. Ikibazo cya mbere, mwatweretse ko export ibyoherezwa mu mahanga byiyongereye, ni byiza, bijyanye na gahunda ya leta ifite, birumvikana. Twashaka ko mudufasha kumenya ibyatumye byiyongera, ndetse na gahunda yo gutuma umuvuduko ukomeza gutyo, cyangwa se imibare ikomeza kwiyongera bidasubiye inyuma. Ikibazo cya kabiri kirarebana n'ubundi n'iyi ngingo basoje kuvuga ya cashless. Nibyo, abantu bose abenshi basigaye bakoresha uburyo bwa cashless economy bishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga, ariko tujya tubibona bikanavugwa cyane ko hari igihe bijya bibaho hakazamo ibibazo mu ikoranabuhanga, by'umwihariko kubishyura bakoresheje telefone. Ugasanga wenda singiye kwibasira sosiyete y'itumanaho runaka, ariko ugasanga uwo munsi hari isaha cyangwa iminota 20 iciyemo abantu batarimo kubasha kwaksesinga uburyo bwo kwishyurana. Twifuzaga kumenya ingamba zaba zihari cyangwa se n'uburyo mushobora kuba no mukorana bya hafi n'izi sosiyete z'itumanaho kugira ngo aba bantu babashe gutanga serivisi neza izo cuts zitabayemo. Icya kabiri no kuba ibiciro barabyurije ejo bundi mu kwishyurana muri e-cash. Mu gihe cyo bitubwiraho murakoze.
Murakoze Governor, mu bitwemereye twafata ikibazo kindi kimwe. Yego.
Murakoze nyakubahwa Governor, nitwa Emeline Mbabazi, nkorera Radio DC na TV10. Ku munsi w'ejo hashize Beneri yagaragaje amabwiriza agenga imikoreshereze ku madevize, hakaba harimo ingingo y'uko hari abantu bemerewe gusaba uruhushya rwo kwishyurwa mu madevize ndetse n'ibisabwa. Ndagira ngo mutubwire ni izihe business cyangwa se ni abahe bantu bemerewe gusaba urwo ruhushya, ibyo bakwiriye kuba bujuje kugira ngo bahabwe urwo ruhushya rwo kwishyurwa mu madevize ni ibihe? Murakoze.
Murakoze, kadusubiza ibyo ngibyo.
Murakoze ku bibazo byiza mutubajije. On va commencer par la question sur le taux d'inflation posé en français et notre économiste en chef va y répondre. Thierry, go ahead.
Merci pour cette question, mais peut-être avant de répondre, je vais essayer de clarifier un peu. L'inflation dont vous parlez, c'est la hausse des prix. Il est important de rappeler que la hausse des prix en tant que telle n'est pas mauvaise pour l'économie. Tout dépend de la vitesse à laquelle ces prix augmentent, ce qui est l'inflation. Dans notre économie, on a, d'après notre recherche, nos différents travaux de recherche, nous avons pu mettre en évidence que l'inflation la plus à même de supporter notre développement devrait être le niveau d'inflation devrait être autour de 5%. Ça veut dire une hausse des prix de 5% par rapport à la même période l'année d'avant. Ce qui fait que notre cible est une fourchette autour de 5%, donc qui commence à 2% jusqu'à 8%. Tant que l'inflation est à ce niveau, ça permet d'être pas assez élevé pour affecter les ménages et le pouvoir d'achat, et en même temps être suffisante pour faciliter la production et motiver les investisseurs. Donc c'est le taux d'inflation idéal, 5%, mais entre 2% et 8%. Le travail donc de la Banque centrale, de la BNR, est de tout mettre en œuvre pour que l'inflation reste à ce niveau-là, ce qui est un niveau aussi qui peut être prévisible pour les investisseurs, soit une inflation basse, mais une inflation stable. Et c'est ce que nous nous efforçons à faire à travers nos différents outils de politique monétaire et le taux de la Banque centrale que nous avons publié au mois d'août. J'espère que ça répond à la question. Merci.
Ku kibazo cyabajijwe ku kwiyongera kw'ibyo twohereza mu mahanga, nibyo koko mu mibare twagaragaje byerekana ko ibyo twohereza mu mahanga mu mezi atandatu ya mbere y'uyu mwaka kuva mu kwa mbere kugeza mu kwezi kwa gatandatu byiyongereyeho 6.1%. Twanareba mu gihembwe cya kabiri cy'uyu mwaka kuva mu kwezi kwa kane kugeza mu kwezi kwa gatandatu tugasanga ibyo twohereje mu mahanga byariyongereyeho 15%. Ni ikigero kiri hejuru cyane kandi gishimishije, kinatanga icyizere cy'uko cyuho cy'ibyo twohereza mu mahanga ugereranyije n'ibyo tuvanayo nacyo murabona ko kitiyongereyeho cyane, ahubwo mu mezi y'igihembwe cya kabiri cyagabanutseho 3%. Ibyo twohereza mu mahanga byiyongereye ni ibihe? Icya mbere mu byiyongereye ni ikawa, amafaranga twinjiza bitewe n'ikawa twohereza mu mahanga, ndetse n'amabuye y'agaciro bitewe cyane cyane n'ibiciro ku masoko mpuzamahanga byiyongereye kuri ibyo bicuruzwa, ariko binasanga natwe ingano y'ibyo twohereza yariyongereye. Icya kabiri tubona ni uko ibyo twohereza mu mahanga bikorewe mu Rwanda nabyo byiyongereye ku kigero kigeze kuri 31%, cyane cyane iyo tubonye ibyo twohereza nk'amavuta yo guteka cyangwa se ifu y'ingano nabyo ni ibintu mu bicuruzwa tubona byiyongereye cyane tubyohereza mu karere. Ibyo rero byatumye ibyo twohereza mu mahanga ku buryo rusange byiyongera. Ni ikintu rero twishimira kandi tubona yuko gahunda ya leta yo kongera umusaruro w'ibikorerwa mu nganda, mwabonye ko urwego rw'inganda rwiyongereyeho 8% ku musaruro mbumbe w'igihugu, ndetse ukanabona n'iyi gahunda yo gukomeza gushishikariza abantu gukora byinshi made in Rwanda, ari ibihaza isoko ry'imbere y'igihugu mu gihugu ndetse n'ibyo twohereza hanze. Ni gahunda ikomeje kandi muzi ko muri NST2 iyi gahunda ya leta y'imyaka 5 ibyo twohereza mu mahanga bigomba kwiyongera cyane. Ubu rero birerekana ko turi mu nzira nziza. Ikibazo cya kabiri wabajije kuri fraude zigenda ziboneka cyangwa se n'abantu bibisha ikoranabuhanga mu kwishyurana, ndetse naho muvuga ati bimwe mu bigo bitanga iyo serivisi yo kwishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga, hari igihe umuntu ategereza akabona nk'iminota 30 ntibikora cyangwa isaha. Twagira ngo tubahumurize kuko hari amabwiriza ya Banki Nkuru y'u Rwanda agenga imikorere y'ibyo bigo, cyane cyane yerekana icyambere yuko mu gihe ibyo bigo bishobora guhura n'imbogamizi mu gukoresha ikoranabuhanga, hari igihe mu ikoranabuhanga systeme zigira ikibazo, iyo serivisi ikaba yahagarara, bagomba guhita bamenyesha abaguzi b'izo serivisi, abakiriya babo mu minota itarenze 30 cyangwa isaha niba ntibeshye. Ikindi cya kabiri ni uko bagomba gushyiraho uburyo bwose butuma izo serivisi zisubiraho zigakomeza gukora, kandi ni ikintu batumenyesha natwe tukagikurikirana umunsi ku wundi. Ikindi ni uko ababikurikije hari ibihano bihabwa muri ayo masosiyete ya serivisi zishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga. Hari izo twagiye duhana, ariko ntago dushaka guhana gusa, turagira ngo yuko banagira ubushobozi butuma zaba izo systeme bakoresha, zaba abantu bakoresha bashinzwe kugenzura izo systeme bari abantu bafite ubuhanga buri hejuru, ndetse natwe ubwacu nka Banki Nkuru y'u Rwanda natwe twashyizemo imbaraga kugira ngo n'abantu bacu bashinzwe kugenzura izo serivisi nabo baba bafite ubumenyi buhagije. Murabuzi ko ikoranabuhanga rigenda rihinduka ku buryo bwihuse, tekinoloji nshyashya, hari igihe na systeme ziba zigomba kugira ngo abazongerera imbaraga. Ibyo nabyo mujya mubona ubutumwa bugufi bubereka ko hari amasaha izo systeme zigomba kongera kuba upgraded. Ibyo kubimenyesha abakiriya byo biremewe kandi tuzi ko ari ibintu bijyana n'ikoranabuhanga. Aho rero twakwizeza abanyarwanda bose n'abakoresha izo serivisi zikoresha ikoranabuhanga yuko ari ikintu tugenzura, kandi tubona ko uko imyaka abantu babyitabira cyane, ariko nuko ubumenyi muri uzo koranabuhanga bugenda bwiyongera, ni ibibazo bigenda bikemuka. Ntago byakemuka burundu kuko ikoranabuhanga niko rigenda, ariko hari amabwiriza bigenga, hari ubugenzuzi dukora, kandi icyambere na mbere no kumenyesha abakiriya b'izo serivisi z'imari ko hari amasaha zishobora kuba zidakora. Hari cya nyuma cya Radio 10 ku mabwiriza twasohoye agenga abashobora kwakira amadovize no kuyakoresha mu kwishyurana. Aho nasaba umuyobozi ushinzwe ishami rya Financial Sector Development Market Conduct Kimenyi Valence kuba yasobanura inzego z'ubucuruzi zemejwe ko zo zishobora kwakira no gusaba kwishyurwa mu mafaranga y'amadovize bitewe n'ibyo bakora. Valence.
Murakoze cyane. Nk'uko bivuze urutonde ni rurerure, ndetse ntago navuga yuko urutonde ruri exhaustive kuko harimo flexibility. Ni ukuvuga ngo igihe cyose ufite impamvu zisobanutse zigaragaza yuko imiterere y'ubucuruzi bwawe ikenera amadolari, Central Bank irahari kugira ngo uzane ubwo busabe, ndetse n'amabwiriza y'uburyo wazana ubwo busabe bukigwa, ubwo burenganzira ukabuhabwa burahari. Ariko urutonde ni rurerure. Hariho real estate, ariko real estate ntabwo ari buri muntu wese wubatse inzu wenda ahantu runaka wemerewe guprayisinga amadolari. Ariko real estate umuntu ufite winvestinze muri real estate ariko ubifitiye icyangombwa cya RDB investment certificate, uwo nguwo yemerewe kuba ya transacting amadolari abantu cyangwa se bakorera muri serivisi za tourism mu bukerarugendo, sector yawe, business yawe iri mu bukerarugendo, urumva yuko wakira abakerarugendo, nawe wemerewe kuba, ubwo harimo n'amahoteli wemerewe kuba wa transacting amadolari, harimo abantu ambasade, abantu batanga serivisi kuri za ambasade ndetse na diplomatic missions. Nanone urumva yuko abantu savinga n'abantu mu by'ukuri bafite inflows, amafaranga bafite amadolari, ntago bazajya kuyashaka ku isoko, ahubwo bafite amadolari bo ubwabo. Ubwo rero twaba tukugoye tukubwiye ngo ubabwire bajye kuvunjisha, so uwo muntu twaramwemereye utanga serivisi kuri za ambasade. Harimo abantu bakora transport na logistics zambukiranya imipaka, bakenera amadolari kuko ntago bakorera mu Rwanda gusa, ahubwo bakorera mu Rwanda ndetse no mu bindi bihugu muzi yuko tudakora ku nyanja. So kugira ngo umuntu importing azana ibicuruzwa ashobora kunyura mu bihugu nka bitatu. So transport na logistics yambukiranya imipaka nawe aremerewe. Harimo n'ibigo by'imari byaje under the Kigali International Financial Center, bije bifite ubucuruzi mu by'ukuri bwambukiranya imipaka in terms of financial services. Nkuko iyo tuvuze KIFC ntago tuvureba u Rwanda gusa, tureba umuntu uje to domicile gusenga ikigo cye mu Rwanda ariko asavinga Afrika yose, asavinga isi yose. Ubwo rero uwo muntu nawe ubifitiye uburenganzira ndetse ahabwa na Kigali International Financial Center, uwo nawe yemerewe kuba transacting amadolari. Abakorera mu bigo ya mining, ubucukuzi bw'amabuye y'agaciro, ndetse navuga yuko umuntu wese ukora muri service cyangwa business exporting cyangwa se importing, uwo nawe waba umugoye kugira ngo umutegeke transacting mu local currency. So umuntu wese uri mining cyangwa se umuntu uri muri export and import industry nawe yemerewe. Ubwo bishatse kuvuga ngo from today aba bantu bemerewe ntabwo bibasaba kuza gutonda kuri benere kubisabira uburenganzira, kuko uburenganzira barawuhabwa n'itegeko na directive. Abo dutegereje ni wa wundi wumva kubera impamvu n'imiterere ya business ye nawe afite impamvu isobanuka yatuma yakira payments mu madolari cyangwa se nawe akishyura amadolari. Uwo nawe turahari, turamutegereje kugira ngo tuganire. Amabwiriza yacu arahari, ari mu Cyongereza no mu Kinyarwanda, ndetse n'ibisabwa kugira ngo usubmiting cyangwa se uzane ubusabe bwawe nabyo birahari mu ndimi zombi. Ubwo turahari kugira ngo tubafashe. Murakoze cyane.
Ariko gavana, ngize ikintu nakongeraho nuko na wa wundi wemerewe mu gihe ibyo akora, tuvuge ni hoteli, amabwiriza amusaba yuko service atanga price list yayo ayishyira mu manyarwanda no mu madolari, kugira ngo umunyarwanda nawe umugannye bitumva ko yemerewe ko yatanga service mu madolari, yanasaba n'umunyarwanda uri mu gihugu yuko nawe mwishyura mu madolari. Icyo ni ikintu nashaka kongeraho ku kintu kimenyera avuze. Bye kuvanga bivuzwe yuko ko abangaba bemerewe kuba bakora batanga service bagacuruza ibyo bakora mu madolari, ko noneho n'umunyarwanda baganye nawe bamusaba yuko abishyura mu madolari. Murakoze.
Murakoze cyane. Reka dufate ibibazo bibiri bya okay, kimwe kugira ngo twihute bw'amasaha.
Yego, murakoze. Nitwa Nkundiye Eric Bertrand, murera Goodrich TV. Hari abaturage twaganiriye b'abacuruzi mu bice bitandukanye by'igihugu batubwira ko bafite ikibazo cy'ibiceri bakira, aho twabashije kugera hari abafite 500,000, 200,000. Abo ni abacuruzi, ariko bakavuga ko iyo babizanye kuri beneri bababwira ngo muzaze ejo bagacika intege, bigatuma batakira ibiva mu baturage. Kugeza ubu usanga hari abaturage babifite mu rugo, ubwo n'ibiceri biba byaragize ikibazo ntibabyakire. Hanyuma tukabaza nka beneri iyo musohoye amafaranga ntimwongere ntabagarukire, nta kibazo bishobora gutera ku bukungu. Hanyuma munatubwire umuti urambye kugira ngo biriya biceri biri kuza ku isoko ugasanga bifite ikibazo uko bizagenda. Ikibazo cya kabiri, mutubwire aho umushinga wa Central Bank Digital Currency ugeze, n'icyo uzamara mu kuzamura agaciro k'ifaranga ry'u Rwanda. Murakoze.
Urakoze, reka turase ku ntego. Ikibazo kimwe.
Murakoze nyakubahwa gavana, nitwa Thierry Ndayishimiye, nkorera radio na televiziyo Isango Star. Ikibazo cyanjye kigendanye, nashaka mudusobanurire ku kijyanye n'izamuka ry'ubukungu muri 2024. Mu mibare mwatugaragarije hari aho bigaragara ko ubukungu bwazamutse ku 8.9%. Nyuma muri uyu mwaka mu ntango nko mu kwezi kwa mbere hari imibare igaragaza ko ari 7.8% niba ntibeshye. Uyu munsi mwatugaragarije ko ubukungu bw'u Rwanda bwazamutse kuri 7.2%. Twagira ngo mudusobanurire gavana, nk'umuturage cyangwa se n'abandi batandukanye, iyo ubirebye iyo mibare igaragaza ko ubukungu busa naho buba bwamanutse, ko niba bivuye kuri 8.9 bikajya kuri 7.2%. Turagira ngo mudusobanurire se bigendana nuko agaciro k'ifaranga kaba gahagaze muri icyo gihe bisobanuye iki? Murakoze cyane.
Murakoze, reka dufate ibibazo bibiri hano. Yego.
Thank you so much. My name is William Evans Mutavazi. I work with RBA. My concern is on the loan gaps, especially in agriculture. You earlier on had, in the exchanges that you had with the minister, you talked about having conversations to ease, to see how you can channel finance into the sector. Mine is to ask about the procedures that are sometimes a bit very tight in terms of access to these loans. I'll talk about, say, for young people, let's say, that were probably getting loans or grants from let's say, BDF or any other institutions. There's a persistent concern that the procedure or the requirements to get the loans are a bit tight for most of the players in the industry. So the minister said that the issue is with access to finance, but I think from the reports that we have, access to finance in Rwanda is about 92% now. But now adoption of that adaptability, getting the finance, now the real access, getting the money out of whoever is the custodian. Also, that is an issue with the green taxonomy. I think there is a lot of money that is in there that they fail to give out because they are trying to be very, they are restricted by the frameworks or the guidelines they play by to issue the money. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And last one for Vince.
Thank you. Nyakubahwa Gavana, nagira ngo mbaze ku kibazo cy'amabanki y'ubucuruzi usanga kimwe n'izindi banki.
Mazina yawe?
Nitwa Christopher Karenzi muri RFI, Radio France Internationale. Nabazaga ku mabanki y'ubucuruzi usanga afunga saa 11 kimwe n'izindi banki nyine, ariko nkurikije ibyo abaturage babaza cyangwa se abacuruzi muri umuvuduko w'iterambere turimo bifuza ko baprolonja bakageza na saa 2 z'ijoro. Si murevuga wiki kuko ngira ngo nimwe mufata icyemezo kugira ngo ku mikorere ya banki. Kandi kasu question s'il vous plaît, ni kijyanye na Dubai Port. Twamenye ko uretse hanga Kigali na Gisengera ngo barafunguye. Se nta gahunda yabi hari ku buryo za Rusizi yafungurwa kureba mu majyepfo ya RDC, ubwo ndavuga za Bukavu n'ahandi kugira ngo biborohereze mbese abacuruzi. Murakoze.
Alright, turakoze cyane, ngira ngo reka dusubize ibyo ngibyo. Vincent. Okay. Vincent, we can take one question. Alright. Thank you.
So ibibazo byabajijwe, turahera kuri iki, is it Goodwitch TV? Yes, ni one. Kubyerekeranye n'ibiciro hanabaza umuyobozi wacu ushinzwe market and banking operations to Chantal kuba yabisubiza, hanyuma ndaza kuvuga ku cya CBDC.
murakoze gavana ku kibazo cy'ibiceri ubundi nagira ngo mbanze nshyire umucyo ku kintu cy'ukuntu amafaranga ari physique ari ibiceri cyangwa inoti agera ku baturage ubundi bica mu mabanki no mu bigo by'imari bivuze ko rero abo baturage ubundi begereye banki zabo cyangwa se ibigo by'imari bakorana nabyo bakabaye babashyikiriza ibyo biceri nabo bakabizana muri beneri ariko ntibikuyeho ko mu gihe ubona ufite amafaranga yangiritse ushobora kuyazana muri beneri ndumva ntawe turasubiza inyuma ayazanye ko tujya twakira nk'abantu batuzanira inoti zahiye gusa tukareba ko byibura zuzuje ubuziranenge cyangwa se izo note zitari fake nubwo zaba zarangiritse tubasha kuzisimbura ubwo rero twamusaba ko yabwira abaturage bakegera ibigo by'imari bakorana nabyo byakwanga bakazabitugezaho muri beneri mwakoze
ku kibazo mwabajije cyerekeranye na CBDC cyangwa ifaranga koranabuhanga nk'uko twabitangaje ubu turacyari mu igerageza nyuma y'ubushakashatsi twari twakoze bwerekanye ko hari inyungu dushobora kubonamo nk'igihugu cyangwa abanyarwanda muri rusange mu gukoresha iri faranga koranabuhanga ariko ibiba byavuye mu nyigo biba bigomba kugira ngo bigeragezwe kuko ni ifaranga rishya rikoresha ikoranabuhanga icya mbere cyari cyagaragaye nk'inyungu ni uko ibiciro cyangwa se igiciro cyo kwishyurana hakoreshejwe ikoranabuhanga dukoresheje iryo faranga koranabuhanga gishobora kujya hasi yaba muri transactions zikorerwa mu gihugu cyangwa se niyo twohereza amafaranga hanze cyangwa amafaranga yoherezwa mu Rwanda nk'iyo diaspora nayo yohereje amafaranga mu nyigo byerekanaga ko haba mu Rwanda ndetse n'ibindi bihugu nabyo biri muri iryo gerageza ko icyo kiguzi gishobora kugabanyukaho 30%. Aho rero ni imwe mu mpamvu ituma tuvuga tuteka tugerageze turebe technology twabonye mu nyigo yakoreshwa ndetse n'abantu batangire kwishyurana bakoresheje iryo faranga koranabuhanga tubanze turebe koko kwizo nyungu arizo ariko tunareba ko n'umutekano wo kwishyurana hakoreshejwe iryo faranga wizewe ndetse ko nta n'imbogamizi cyangwa se ibibazo byaba bigendanye n'ubujura bwo gukoresha kwishyurana mu koranabuhanga ukoresheje iryo faranga ryaba ririmo. Iyo faze ya kabiri rero yigeragezwa cyane cyane ibyo twita proof of concept ku bantu bake rigomba kurangirana n'uku kwezi tukaba tuzatangaza ibizaba byavuyemo hanyuma byamara kurebwaho tukaba twakora noneho igerageza mu baturage ku bantu batari benshi noneho mbere yuko icyemezo cy'uko iryo faranga koranabuhanga rikoreshwa mu Rwanda ryatangizwa icyo cyemezo kikaba cyafatwa hamaze gukoresha iryo gerageza no mu baturage ubundi twizera ko ibyo byaba birangiye iyo phase ya gatatu yabirangiye mu mpera z'umwaka utaha w'2026. Ikibazo cyerekeranye n'umusaruro mbumbe wiyongereyeho 7.2% mu mezi 6 ya mbere y'umwaka nuko duhuza n'imibare yabo umusaruro mbumbe w'umwaka w'2024 ndetse n'imibare cyangwa se projections tuba twakoze aho nasaba umuyobozi wacu ushinzwe politike y'ifaranga Kasai kuba yasobanura ko duhuza iyo mibare.
murakoze ku bijyanye n'umusaruro mbumbe hari icyo umunyamakuru witwa Ndayishimiye abajije avuga ati se turebye uko ubukungu bwazamukaga wenda dufashe nko mu myaka ishize aho twagiye tugera ku 8 n'ibice birenga hari naho twageze hafi ku 10%, noneho wabigereranya nuko ubu buri kuzamuka nkuko gavana yabivuze muri presentation yakoze aho tubona ko buri kuzamuka kuri 7.2. ufashe iyo mibare ukagarukira aho wenda wavuga ati ese haba hari ikihe kibazo, ariko icyo tugomba kumva ni uko iyo 7%, 7.2% ni ibyiyongera ku byari biriho. ni ukuvuga mu mwaka washize niba hariyongereyeho 8, umwaka washize niba hariyongereyeho 8, imibare yahindutse, niyo mpamvu mbanje kureba kuko habayeho rebasing. niba byariyongereyeho nk'umwaka ushize ni 7.2, ariko wabanjirije 8.4, ukavuga utese kuba uwo muvuduko uri kugabanyuka byaba ari ikibazo. Ntabwo ari ikibazo, nagerageje wenda gutekereza umuntu abishize mu rugero rworoshye umuntu yakumva. umuntu yafata n'umuvuduko w'imodoka, imodoka iri kugendera muri 80 iba iri kugenda yihuta, ariko n'iri kugendera muri 70 ibirometero 70 ku isaha nayo iba ikiri kwihuta. aho ngaho nibyo wenda wagereranya. hamwe twari turi ku 8%, nangwa twari turi ku 9%, ubu turi muri 7%, nabwo turacyari kwihuta. Chief Economist yigeze kubivugaho kare mu Cyongereza, hari ikibazo cyari cyabajijwe ubigereranyije nuko ubukungu bw'isi buri kuzamuka muri rusange, ubwo n'u Rwanda rurimo, ariko tubifatanirije hamwe ubukungu bw'isi buri kuzamuka ku kigero cya 3%, ubwo u Rwanda buri kuri 7.2%. urumva ko ubigereranyije birazamuka cyane. wamanuka ukagera kuri Afurika aho ubukungu bw'isi nako ubukungu bwayo buzamuka kuri 4%, nabwo turacyari hejuru cyane ugereranyije nuko ubukungu bwa Afurika buri kuzamuka. wagaruka ku karere turimo ka East Africa, naho urazamuka kurusha uko bwa Afurika muri rusange buzamuka, buruta n'ubw'isi. naho ubu ngubu ufashe nk'umwaka ushize n'uyu turimo, umwaka ushize ni 5.4%, uyu mwaka byitezwe ko bizazamukaho 5.5%. wafata mu karere, u Rwanda rwonyine nirwo ruri kuzamuka, nangwa byitezwe ko ruzazamuka ku kigero cya 7%. birumvikana rero ko nubwo uwo muvuduko utangana n'umwaka ushize, uracyari umuvuduko wo hejuru ugereranyije nuko ubukungu bw'isi bwifashe. numva ariko nabisobanura nyakubahwa Gavana.
Murakoze. twakomeza ku bibazo bibiri byari byabajijwe bisigaye. The first one is from RBA. On one, probably I would summarize it on how do we make sure that there's financing going to underserved sectors or underserved groups, starting with finance to agriculture. In past years, we used to have agriculture share of the total loan portfolio of banks, microfinance, at less than 2%. In the last 6 months, we've seen a slight increase. It's not yet satisfactory, but we see now that agriculture is one among the top 10 finance sectors in the country at 2.7%, so close to 3%. It's not what we would want, because agriculture still represents 25% of our GDP, employing more than 70% of our adult population. So we should have it, actually, for me, in the top 2 or top 3. But it's also a sector that has many risks. Most of our agriculture is still dependent on rainfall, and with adverse weather conditions, climate-related risks, the income from agricultural production is not always predictable. And so there needs to be de-risking mechanisms that allow banks and microfinance to give credit to farmers or even commercial agriculture, but making sure that it can mitigate their losses. And that's why the National Agricultural Insurance Scheme was put in place, where government subsidizes the premiums at 60%, and the farmers pay 40% of the premium. And this is one of the guarantees that de-risks the agriculture sectors. Of course, we would like to have more products, and that's why you see microfinance, because of also microinsurance products that are also on the market now, financing more agriculture. But their financial muscle is, of course, limited compared to banks. And these engagements that we are ready to be part of between the Ministry of Agriculture, the banking sector, the insurance sector, is to look at their assessment of risks and for government to be able to propose de-risking mechanisms. You might recall that there's also a program that's co-financed by the World Bank, the CDAT, managed under the Development Bank of Rwanda, BRD, where there are subsidized loans being given to agricultural products. Agricultural projects. So this is one areas of where we bring in development partners to help us also de-risk that sector. Lastly is to look at the challenges we're having on credit, access to credit. True, when we look at access to financial services, so number of people who have either a bank account, microfinance account, or mobile money account, 92% of our adult population have an account, but access to credit is still limited. Only 12% if we look at our numbers from the financial inclusion dashboard. What does that mean? That borrowing rate is still very low, and that there needs to be initiatives and policies to make sure that one, we raise the financial literacy of our population to understand how to access loan, how to service that loan so that banks are more, have more appetite to lend to individuals and households. The second is also to allow more alternative credit data instead of always asking for collateral, to look at other ways where banks can be able to assess your risk profile, looking at, for instance, at your transaction history, looking at transactions that you do on your mobile money wallet. I can see your income coming in, your behavior in terms of spending, and be able to assess whether you have the ability to pay without necessarily you giving me a collateral. There's progress as far as uncollateralized loan products on the market are coming, and I think using technology, data analytics, we're going to see more and more of those products where you don't necessarily have to have a collateral. And that's one of the impediments that being youth, being small and medium-sized enterprises have to access credit. And the Central Bank of Rwanda has also initiated projects to look at alternative credit credentials by using data that we collect from mobile money or transactions that you're doing, and be able to have a risk credit scoring based on that data, and banks being able to extend loans without necessarily having to ask for collateral. So that's what I can say on that question. Ikibazo cya nyuma cyabajijwe na EHFI, ubaza uti se kuki banki zifunga kare. Hari ibintu bitandukanye. Banki iyo ufite uko ushobora gukomeza gukorana nayo ukoresheje ikoranabuhanga, ubundi nk'ufite mobile banking cyangwa internet banking, ni ukuvuga kuba yabona serivisi z'imari yaba mu mabanki cyangwa se mu bigo by'imari biciriritse, ndetse n'ubu na za sakozi zose ubu zashoboye kuba zajya muri iyi project ya automation, aho imirenge sako 416 noneho ikoresha ikoranabuhanga. Nuko niyo ikigo cy'imari mukorana gifunze, ushobora gukomeza kubona serivisi z'imari ukoresheje ikoranabuhanga. Icyo ni ikintu dukwiye kwishimira, kuko yaba saa 4 z'ijoro ushobora kohereza amafaranga, ndetse na systeme ya banki nkuru y'u Rwanda yitwa RIPS ituma amabanki ashobora kohereza amafaranga hagati yayo, nayo isiko ikora amasaha 28 ndetse no muri weekend, iminsi 7 y'icyumweru. Aho rero nubwo uvuga uti serivisi wenda umuntu ntago mubona imbere yanjye, ariko ukoresheje ikoranabuhanga murabizi ukomeza gushobora kwishyurana amasaha yose y'umunsi. Aho rero ni ikintu tuvuga ko gishimishije, kidasaba yuko banki bifunguye ngo ubone serivisi z'imari, ahubwo zibona igihe cyose. Aho umuntu yavuze ati se abadakoresha ikoranabuhanga bo ubwo ntihari ikibazo biteye. Birashoboka, ariko gahunda ya leta nuko dushishikariza abantu bose kuba bakoresha ikoranabuhanga, ariko icyo kibazo muvuga twakomeza kukirebaho, nk'uko mwabibonye ko leta nayo irimo nashishikariza n'abakoresha inganda kujya bakora amasaha ya nijoro, kuko ariho nk'uko twabibonye mu biciro by'umuriro byongereye, ukoze nijoro wishyura make. uko tugenda tujya mu iterambere kandi tujya mu iterambere rishingiye kuri za serivisi ni nako imikorere igomba guhinduka. Ariko nanone uruhare rw'ikoranabuhanga ntabwo twarwirengagiza ku buryo twavuga ngo nyuma ya saa 11 nta buntu ubona serivisi z'imari. Aho rero ndumva ikoranabuhanga ni kimwe mu bisubizo, ariko nuko imikorere igenda ihinduka kugira ngo turusheho gutera imbere, cyane cyane tunateza imbere serivisi z'imari ndetse no kubaka iki gicumbi cyacu cya serivisi z'imari ku rwego mpuzamahanga. Ni ikintu nta kintu kibibuza mu mabwiriza ya beneri, ahubwo ni tradition yo ko abantu bumva ko bakora kugeza saa 11 ubundi bakarekeraho, ariko ni ubucuruzi nabwo n'ayo masaha kwiyongera ntago tubibuza. Ikibazo mwabajije cya Dubai Port, ntago ari wenda banki nkuru y'u Rwanda yagisubiza, ariko in general ikintu cyose gituma ubucuruzi bwambukiranya imipaka bworoha ni ikintu leta yashyizemo imbaraga, byaba ku gushyiraho ibyambu no ku kiyaga cya Kivu mwarabibonye, ndetse no kuba Dubai Port ari ikigo mpuzamahanga kijyanye n'ibintu bya transport kiri mu mujyi wa Kigali ho hashize igihe, Masaka, ariko no ku mipaka n'ibihugu duturanye, nacyo ni ikintu cyo kwishimira. Kandi no muri gahunda ya leta biracyariho ko ntabwo ari ukuvuga Rubavu niba yatangiye ntabwo tuvuga ko tundi turere twegereye icyo kiyaga two twibagiranye, ahubwo nuko abashoramari n'abari ukugenda umuntu abereka amahirwe ahari, kandi nzi ko nabyo biri muri gahunda. Murakoze.
Murakoze cyane Gavana, munyemerere nshimire media partners, ariko namwe mbashimire kubw'umwanya mwatugeneye, kandi nizera yuko media partners bari budutumikire ku banyarwanda bose n'ibindi bihugu. Murakoze cyane, mugire umunsi mwiza.
Murakoze kandi twishimiye ubufatanyabikorwa bwanyu. Umunsi mwiza.